Guild of Magic. Prologue. In any age. The world hums as I sleep in my rainy prison. Despite all the changes that have transpired, there is a familiar rhythm, an inevitable pattern that emerges if one listens long enough. And listening is all I can do. It has been several decades since I was corporeal. Maybe people are getting smarter, learning from their old mistakes. Maybe they have forgotten about me, and I will remain in this wooden box for all eternity. Or at least until the alchemy that binds my essence to this stone wears away, and I can finally escape into an everlasting rest. Or maybe I need only one more opportunity to break the pattern that has been my existence these 1,500-odd years. Maybe the next person who slips that silver chain over their neck and presses the stone will be the conduit I need to return to a true life. And when that happens, I will finally destroy those who imprisoned me. For across these long centuries, although I have forgotten their faces, I have not forgotten their names. One day, the box finally opens again. I, of course, cannot see such a thing in my current state, but I have learned to mind my surroundings enough so I can sense this. I feel a soft hand lift the chain and my stone out of confinement and onto the neck of someone warm. Another hand presses the glamour and my body erupts from it, enveloping the girl who had found me. I can feel her energy pushing against mine. It is mortal, but it is fiery and fierce. A sacrifice worthy of my renewal. In those brief few seconds when the two of us merge, I learn what I can about her. A Castellan's daughter. A daughter of Atlantis through her maternal line. A keeper of a relic. Now that is interesting. Much more unique than the usual plebeians who find me. I try to divine more, but the moment is over, and I must step back and merely watch. She clasps her hand, my hand, around her mouth to stifle the fit of excitement. To her, I am a magical costume, but she will soon learn the truth. She stares ahead at the other woman in the room with her, and if I still had a heart, it would have skipped a beat. Her appearance has changed slightly, but I would remember that hair and those eyes in any age. My sister is that striking. "What do you think, Eliana?" she says. Even her voice is the same. "I love it, Aaliyah," says the girl. So that is what she is calling herself in this era. Clever. "I knew you would," says my sister. The girl leans in toward Aaliyah, but this is too much for Aaliyah, and she reaches down her hand to the girl's necklace to withdraw my body back into the stone. Several days later, I awake again as the girl is running about the island that is her home. She basks in the freedom I give her, to move unseen through the crowded market and through the soldier camps. I would warn her to be a stranger in the midst of the familiar may be exhilarating, but is also dangerous, especially for a young woman. But I do not yet have the strength to do anything other than observe and wait. Finally, after half a year of dalliances, I feel strong enough to exert myself. And thankfully, that is when Aaliyah has decided to return to see her young lover. She enters the girl's bedchamber through the window and presses the stone while Eliana slumbers. I awake and stare at her, the moonlit sky casting a gentle glow on the room. "Hello, sister," she says. "I have been looking for you for a long time." Eliana does not move, and I take that as my cue, so I extend myself around the sleeping girl, and it is if I am almost alive once again. "Sister," I say, sitting the girl up in the bed. "It is good to see you. I do not remember the last time we shared such a quiet moment together." "That is because they have stolen most of your memories," she replies. "But you somehow kept enough inside of you after they reduced me to a hollow shell," I say. "Yes, I was always quite remarkable. Tell me, have you come to restore me to my former glory?" The sad look on my sister's face tells me all I need to know. "Finding this stone took centuries," she says. "I do not know how much longer it will take me to find the others." "I see," I say. "But I have been productive on my own while you were looking for me. And this girl you have found will provide me with strength enough for now, I think, to continue my work. With the two of us, it will be easy to track down where they have taken my—" "I'm sorry," Leah says, "but you cannot have her." I laugh. Why not? Is this not why you have ensnared her with your charms? You were always good at finding the... Oh. My sister, ever the romantic, even if it will be fleeting. Yes, says Aaliyah. Again, I am sorry, but I will find others. The three of us together, we will be so formidable, you will see. Okay, I say. We will do it your way, because whatever draws you to this girl Eliana, I felt it too. She is special. On that we agree, says Aaliyah. For now, though, I must take back my present from her. But know this, we will see each other again soon. I am sure of it. My sister is a terrible liar. Chapter 1. Red Pill. Living is easy. Dying is harder. Lady Melanie Fitzjames, Duchess of Montagu, Charleston, South Carolina, March 1st, 1815. The phone rang. This was not an uncommon occurrence in this city of 8 million souls, most of whom spent the majority of their in-between moments with their heads glued to a glowing screen. But this particular phone was not an iPhone, an old rotary landline, or one of those fancy, at the time, flip phones where the cover slid down with the press of a button. No, this was a payphone on the darkened corner of First Street and First Avenue. And it shouldn't have been ringing at all, because as my research had confirmed after my prior visits to this nexus of firsts, this phone booth should have been demolished several years ago with the rest of its brethren. Despite all that, the phone continued its song, and I knew that the patience of the person on the other end was growing thin. So I crossed the darkened avenue without further delay, slid the folding door of the phone booth open along the rusty track, and stepped inside. Hello? I said, picking up the dirty plastic receiver and wishing I had wiped it off first. You're late, Jade, said a gruff female voice on the other end. I glanced down at my watch. It was 3:20, Monday morning, so technically, I was a minute late. Look, I've been playing this game with you and your friend, and that other guy who sounds like he's always eating a bag of chips for 5 weeks now, and I really don't appreciate the... Enough! Do you want the next mission or not? Because from where I'm sitting, it sounds like you really don't want to be in the guild. Fine, sorry, no more backtalk. What's the scoop? In 47 minutes, a crate of green apples will be delivered to the Union Square Trader Joe's. You will make sure that it does not make it into the store. Apples. Why was it always apples? Okay, I said, but that doesn't give me a lot of time to get up there and figure out a plan. Well, said the voice, maybe next time then, you won't be tardy. The line went dead with a click, and I hung up the phone with such force that I nearly broke the plastic in two. I briefly considered demolishing the rest of the booth, using the quarter of a strength buff that I had left to my name, but thought better of it. Once I somehow completed its latest quest, there would be time enough to vent my frustration in a proper manner. Except that was a lie, because every time I thought I had gotten one step closer to being done with this silly initiation, I found myself again thrust into a nearly impossible task. They all started the same way. A cryptic text message would appear on the simple black cell phone Gilbert had given me after I had thrown my gold token into the fountain at Greenacre Park. The first one had provided the location of the phone booth, and the second one a date and time. There was no pattern or rhythm to the timing of the 5 summonses I had received, save that I was always given at least an hour to get to the phone. It was fortunate, then, that I didn't have a job, didn't have any friends, at least any who remembered me, didn't have a boyfriend, and didn't have a semi-sociopathic mentor-turned-questing partner. All of that would have held me down, would have prevented me from completing the guild's gauntlet. And what a gauntlet it had been so far. It was like I was back in my first months of the quest board, except these quests weren't of the simple fetch variety. No buying bagfuls of groceries at Chelsea Market for me. Instead, it was scrambling along wet rocks on Atlantic Beach, trying to collect enough moss to fill a ramekin, or stealing a particular petal from the corpse flower at the New York Botanical Garden. Then there was the afternoon I spent smuggling rare books out of the library where I used to work. Sure, it was satisfying to have handled everything that they had thrown at me. And the quest also served as a useful distraction to help me forget about that horrific day on the island. But each time I received a new quest, the same sinking feeling would return, that this would be the one that I couldn't complete. And with that failure, I would be booted from the guild, my gold token confiscated in the middle of the night by some guild henchman, or Gilbert, or even Dahlia herself. I pushed aside such thoughts and began walking briskly uptown. It would be a 15-minute walk to my destination at this pace, and that would give me at least another 15 minutes once I arrived to formulate a plan. Assuming this was a popular delivery time, the loading bay would be swarmed with workers, and I didn't exactly look like an archetypical produce delivery man. That was especially the case with the glamour activated. The small green stone hung on a silver chain around my neck, nestled under my mother's locket. That locket was the reason for my current predicament. What I had originally thought was just a stupid birthday gift from my now dead mother was actually the hiding place for a gold token. And that token was worth more than just the gold it was made of. It was the 12th and long-missing gold token of the Worshipful Company of Alchemists, otherwise known as the Guild. My watch ticked over to 4 a.m. as I turned left onto 14th Street. 7 minutes to come up with a plan. Perfect. If I were Beatrice, it would have been plenty of time. I would simply sidle up to the worker unloading the truck, ask him his name, and then hand him a note written in command ink that would order him to give me the apples. Or I would eat a small piece of a speed buff and just take the apples with no one the wiser. Or if that wasn't feasible, then I'd use a strength buff or a sliver of power from the purple stone on my finger and steal the apples by force. Or if all those options for some reason failed, then I would stab the guy with the meadowblad, turn him to stone, and take the apples. And then, if I was feeling charitable and the incident hadn't made the national news yet, I would come back later and stab him with the other end of the blade to heal him. But all I had at my disposal was the tiny bit of strength buff, a tube of vitality serum, and the glamour, now that Beatrice was gone. When activated, the stone created a projection around my entire body that made me look and sound like a 22-year-old redhead with sparkling green eyes and a raspy voice. I had dubbed her Jade Peters after my old handle, Jade Phoenix 42, and I was spending more and more of each day as her as the weeks of my initiation had slowly ticked by. This was the unfortunate consequence of presenting myself as Jade during our initial encounters with both Dahlia and Gilbert. And then there was the high I still felt every time I stepped out in public behind her facade. Truth be told, I didn't like what the glamour was doing to me. There were too many nights where I would go to sleep as myself and wake up the next morning as her. But that was a problem for another day. Now, I needed Jade in spades. I crossed 14th Street and walked the full block to survey the scene. The store was bounded by 2 sets of metal doors, and hordes of workers were already furiously moving pallets of wooden crates onto hand trucks at both ends before pushing them inside. This would not be as simple as batting my eyelashes, flashing a smile, and walking away with the apples. I cursed under my breath as I reached 4th Avenue and saw a red truck rumbling toward the intersection. I was out of time and out of options. The light turned green, and I watched the truck begin to cross the road. But before it could pull through the intersection, something grabbed hold of my body and forced me into the street. It was as if someone had attached puppet strings to my limbs and was manipulating my movements from above. My arm raised itself up from my side and stretched out in front of me, my hand now urging the truck to stop. Thankfully, it did. The truck let loose 4 successive blasts of the horn, but whatever was controlling me held its ground, and my other hand began pointing to the curb on the south side of the street. The driver stared at me in disbelief, and then, to my relief, turned on his blinker, and I felt myself step backward to give the truck berth to maneuver over to the curb. That's when I saw it, out of the corner of my eye. The glamour stone was glowing ever so faintly, the green light shimmering in the darkness of the early morning. If I could just reach my hand up a few inches, then I could deactivate its alchemy and regain control of my body. But it was as if the stone could read my thoughts, because no sooner had I formulated the thought than the glamour's pressure around my real body increased exponentially. I struggled against its weight, but found my will being pushed into the back of my mind, leaving me a bystander in my own flesh. I watched as I walked over to the truck and rapped my knuckle against the door. The driver glared at me through the window, his eyes bloodshot and his hair ruffled, before slowly opening the cab and stepping out onto the street. "You mind telling me what the fuck you think you're doing?" he said, spit flying from his mouth. I wanted to say that I also would like to know the answer to that question, but then my mouth, or rather Jade's mouth, began to move on its own accord. "And good morning to you too, sir," said the voice with a sing-song note. "We're full in front, so you'll have to unload here, I'm afraid." The man looked at me cross-eyed, and I thought he was about to unleash a second tirade at me, but instead he grumbled something to himself and started walking to the rear of the truck. I followed him, the glamour pulling me forward like I was a dog on a leash, and watched as he slid the back door of the truck up to reveal crates filled with produce, including one near the front filled to the brim with green apples. The driver took out a small hand truck and unfolded it on the street, before stacking several crates on top of it and wheeling them away toward the store without another word. The crate with the green apples remained, and my hands quickly snatched it from the truck, and then my feet were on the move. It seemed too easy, putting aside the fact that I had completely lost control of my body. Jade walked me south on 4th Avenue for a block, then turned on to 13th Street, continuing on until we reached a 24-hour parking garage, which we entered. The attendant was asleep in the booth, and so we journeyed unimpeded to the back, where a door opened into a dark alleyway. As my eyes adjusted, I could see that we were behind the Trader Joe's, a smattering of empty crates and other refuse strewn about. Something about this place was familiar, but I couldn't remember what or why. "You're welcome, by the way," said Jade's voice before the pressure suddenly subsided, and my body reappeared from beneath the glamour. A wave of relief washed over me, and I looked down to see my hands, my real hands, holding the requested crate of apples. There would be time to deal with what had just happened, but for now I wanted to take a few moments to savor my success. But it was a short victory party, because a minute later I heard the patter of footsteps approaching, and I turned around slowly to see a group of a dozen teenage girls, all dressed in black leather jackets, with jet black hair and black eyeliner, pleated black skirts, and knee-high black boots emerge from the shadows of the alley. "You," said the girl in the middle, who was holding a very long, very sharp, and very glowing knife, with a bright white hilt, "are trespassing in our territory." It all came back to me in an instant, and I could feel my stomach turning itself inside out. "And you are?" I said. But I already knew the answer, the images of the glowing green scar and the frail old man flashing in my mind. The girl with the knife smiled. "We're the Black Vultures, and you're about to die." Chapter 2. Birds of Prey. The process grows harder each time. Restoring my youth is a trivial matter, but altering my appearance so as not to arouse suspicion taxes my facilities. And without Rita's lifetime of memories, now lost to me, when I look in the mirror at my new visage, it is as if I have truly been reborn. One time, when I was 12, I was cornered in a bathroom by a gaggle of girls, not too dissimilar from the one currently threatening me with bodily harm. They grabbed me by the arms, dragged me to the last stall, and stuck my head in the toilet until I thought I was going to drown. It was not a pleasant afternoon. 16 years later, this encounter was shaping up to be worse than the last one. "Oh, I see," I said, trying to project an air of confidence. These girls didn't know a damn thing about me, and maybe I could use that to my advantage. "You going to stab me with that little knife of yours? For accidentally walking into your territory? Give me a fucking break." This time, it was the girl to the leader's left who spoke, although in the dim light of the alleyway, they pretty much all looked like a goth version of the Children of the Corn. "No, the stabbing is only for when you don't listen to what she said," the second girl said in a deep baritone voice that squeaked at the end, betraying her near pubescence. I nearly laughed, but then remembered poor Steve, rapidly aged, struggling to sit down on the subway, and Polly, who in her desperation had betrayed us to the guild in the hopes of finding a cure. "That blade looks very scary, I have to admit. Did you get it at Hot Topic with your training bra? You used it on a friend of mine. He said it was like getting cut by a Play-Doh knife-wielding Girl Scout. I don't even think he put a bandage on the wound after." My bravado was on the verge of faltering, and unless they relented soon, I was going to find myself on the wrong end of a very painful and very slow death. And without the Meadowblad's other blade to heal me, I would be in an old age home next to Steve before the month was out. Maybe Polly would come to see us on the weekends. The second girl turned red and curled her fist, but the knife-wielding girl stopped her. "I think your friend has misinformed you. This knife is actually the relic white hilt, passed down from father to son for 1,000 years until I was born, and my dad, in disgust over failing to produce a firstborn son, refused to give it to me. Do you know what I did to him? Shit. You threw a temper tantrum and then ran into your room crying? I slowly lowered the crate of apples to the ground and brought my right hand close to the glamour stone. It wouldn't be much, but maybe showing them I too had ancient power on my side would make them reconsider their aggression. Enough, the girl replied. You are starting to annoy me, so you'll be finding out exactly what happened to him. Marcy, Layla, if you don't mind. 2 girls nodded and then reached into their jacket pockets to pull out brightly colored square gummies. They unwrapped them, broke off tiny pieces, and started chewing. I cursed Beatrice under my breath. If I ever saw her again, I was going to give her an earful about how much trouble she had caused us by selling her buffs to Phineas. I grasped the glamour with my fingers and squeezed, the familiar wave of jade washing over me. But I mind, I said, nearly shouting, because my name is Jade Peters, and I'm a member of the guild. All of the Black Vulture's eyes widened in unison, but their leader was undeterred, and she gestured to Marcy and Layla, who vanished in a flash and reappeared at my side, their brass knuckle-adorned hands gripping my arms behind my back so hard I thought they were going to crush them. The leader slowly approached as I struggled to free myself, but I was no match for the girl's alchemy-enhanced strength. Impressive, said the girl. So you're not just a regular idiot walking into my alley. You've got yourself a glamour, and a rather attractive-looking one at that. That will be very useful to me. She grabbed the chain around my neck and started to pull, but suddenly stopped as loud footsteps echoed on the alley stones behind us. I wouldn't do that if I were you, said a familiar voice. An unassuming man wearing a brown sport coat and horn-rimmed glasses had emerged from the back of the garage and strolled casually toward the rest of the gang. It was Gilbert. The vultures all rotated their heads in unison like something out of The Exorcist and stared at the newcomer. Calling him unassuming was being charitable. Banal would be a better fit. I'm sure he didn't mind being described as such. There was a certain benefit to not being noticed, to being ignored by the masses, and that was doubly true when you were a member of a centuries-old shadowy organization bent on reclaiming the lost magic of the world. But there was nothing ordinary about how we had met. He had been the literal boogeyman for several weeks, pursuing Beatrice and me from the shadows as we searched for a cure to undo the stone curse of the Meadowblod. Until we learned that the Gilbert that had been dogging our footsteps wasn't Gilbert at all, but Doug, Beatrice's first trainee, who she had tried to kill after he had turned into a crazy stalker. Then Gilbert had intervened and twisted Doug into an even crazier stalker, and had also given him a glamour to boot, one made in his own image. Needless to say, things got out of hand, and the real Gilbert had shown up after we had been forced to turn Doug into a pile of broken stone. Then there was that whole throw your token into the mysterious pool of water ceremony that Gilbert had invited us to, where Beatrice's gold token had exploded, and she had fled without so much as a goodbye. With her gone, and all the people from my normal life either dead, forgotten, or furious at me, the man in the alleyway was the only person who might have cared that I was still alive. Which was all a long way of saying that I was kind of glad to see him. The lead girl dropped the glamour and turned to face Gilbert. And you are? She said, motioning to Marcy and Layla to rejoin their compatriots. I used the opportunity to slink off to the side of the new confrontation that was developing. I'm Gilbert. The girl's demeanor wavered slightly. Evidently, his name alone carried weight in this world, but what he was going to do against that relic, I wasn't sure. If you're Gilbert, then you know this is our domain, and the guild has no business here. Gilbert looked around the alleyway before turning his attention back to the leader. Not much of a domain, if you ask me. Looks more like a shithole, he said with a smile. Fuck off, said the girl. You I'll give a pass to. But this bitch back here, she turned and pointed to me, wandered in here uninvited. You can have her once we take our toll. You really that desperate for a crate of apples? Said Gilbert. How about I give you $50 plus a few bronze for good measure, and you can buy all the apples you want. Do you think I'm stupid? Asked the girl. Those aren't just any apples. Those are from Running Brook Orchard. They've got celestinite, and with them, I'm going to take the black vultures out of this alley and claim what's ours. Don't count on it. said yet another voice from the shadows. A young woman soon appeared from the garage. She had dark auburn hair and was sporting a pair of sunglasses, despite the early hour. Her outfit was capped off by knee-high black boots and a pleated skirt. But instead of the black one worn by the vultures, hers was orange, which matched the hair tie around her ponytail. "Patel," said the lead girl with a scowl. "What are you doing here? Come to beg us to let you back in? It was you who thought you were too good to lead us anymore, once the guild had come calling." "Zoe, charming as ever," said the woman. Despite her British accent, there was something familiar about her voice. "No, I'm not here to reclaim the mantle from you, although maybe I should. I'm here for my knife. And for her." She pointed at me, and it was then I realized who she was. The woman from the phone. "As I was just saying to your friend over here," said the girl called Zoe, "if you walk in here uninvited, there will be consequences. And it's my knife now, in case you've forgotten, the price you paid for abandoning us." The woman, who couldn't have been older than 20, smirked at the threat, reached into the flannel tote bag slung around her shoulder, and pulled out an improbably long metal sword with a jewel-encrusted hilt. The blade glistened, despite the darkness that enveloped the alley, and I wondered what alchemy it possessed. "Emma," said Gilbert to the woman, holding up a silver pocket watch he had pulled from his jacket, "we're going to be late to our appointment if you don't hurry this up." Emma rolled her eyes at Gilbert and held up her empty right hand, which sported a set of thick silver rings on her middle 3 fingers. She pulled her hand back slightly, and the knife in Zoe's hand began to shake, much to the vulture leader's consternation. "Heh," said Emma. "I figured you were too much of a shit-for-brains imbecile to cleanse the origin off of White Hilt." She yanked her hand backward, and the knife flew out of Zoe's grip, spun end over end several times, until Emma snatched it out of the air with a flourish. "Much better," she said, adjusting her stance to account for the new weapon in her arsenal. I could only gawk at the alchemy prowess on display, my little glamour paling in comparison. The other vultures looked at Zoe for some sign of strength, but all the fight had gone out of her, and she stood there, dumbfounded. It was then that Marcy, or Layla, I didn't know which, dashed forward with buffed enhanced speed. But when she reappeared mere inches in front of Emma, her arm already half-cocked into a punch, the woman was ready. She deflected the girl's brass knuckles easily with her sword blade, sending the vulture staggering backward a few steps. Undeterred, the girl scrambled to her feet and tried again. This time, though, Emma sidestepped the punch and then smashed the pommel of her sword into her attacker's stomach, sending the vulture onto the ground. Emma nudged her fallen comrade in the ribs with her boot, and, satisfied that the girl was unconscious, she bent down and started removing the brass knuckles. "Hey!" yelled Zoe. "Don't you fucking dare!" It all happened so fast that I was sure my eyes were playing tricks on me, because the next thing I knew, White Hilt was somehow floating in midair in front of Zoe. I looked over at Emma, who was back on her feet, her arm outstretched and the fingers of her ring-adorned hand clenched around an invisible tether. She loosened her grip slightly, and the dagger inched closer to Zoe's throat, a look of terror forming on the girl's face. "Emma, please," Zoe said with a whimper. "You don't have to do this." "But I think I do, Zozo. Remember when I would call you that and you would get so annoyed? It was cute, in a way. Then I showed you what real alchemy looked like, and it was as if the psychopath switch went on in your mind. How many people have you hurt with this blade by now?" I don't answer me," said Emma, the anger in her voice rising to a crescendo. 11, the girl blurted out. "That's 10 too many. If I let you walk out of here alive, how many more will you—" "Are you quite finished?" interrupted Gilbert, and Emma shot him a venomous look, as if he didn't grasp or care about the significance of what she was doing. But in that one distracted moment, Zoe ducked under the floating blade and made a beeline toward her former mentor. The poor girl, she never saw it coming. Instead, all she saw was Emma yank her hand back in a furious motion before the dagger's hilt hit her squarely in the rear of the head. Zoe let out a guttural cry as her chin hit the pavement a few inches in front of Emma, and the woman tapped the unconscious girl's cheek with the tip of her boot before nodding to herself. "Yes. Now I'm done." Chapter 3. Vital Secrets. I buried Rita in a stately grave in Richmond. There were no attendees at the funeral besides me. In a month's time, there will be the reading of the will. I need to summon the heirs. You're a real buzzkill, you know that? Emma said to Gilbert as we walked through the garage and back onto the street. Her sword had somehow disappeared back into the tote bag, along with the newly reclaimed white hilt. Was gonna cut off her hand for good measure, but I guess I'll have to save that until her 18th birthday. Gilbert ignored her, and we continued toward Union Square, the crate of mind-linking apples still straining my forearms. I said to both of them after a few blocks of total silence. Thanks for bailing me out back there. Don't get used to it, said Gilbert. Anyway, it was better than having to explain to Dahlia why our newest member was murdered in the service of Miss Patel's revenge quest. Hey! Interrupted Emma. You're lucky I'm even speaking to you, he said. The guild initiation is not about settling old scores. You of all people should know that. I'm sorry, I interjected. But you're the woman from the phone, right? Emma nodded. And you're also in the guild. Right again, Jade. She's quick, this one. Gilbert rolled his eyes at the quip as we reached the interior of Union Square Park, which was still quiet at this early hour. He directed us to one of the benches, and I finally put down the crate of apples. In case you hadn't gathered before, I'm Emma Patel, second seat of the Pavonia table. She extended her ring-adorned hand, and I shook it. The what table? I asked. Also, what's with the fake British accent all of a sudden? It's not fake, said Emma, breaking into a Cockney version of her accent. I'm a true Brit, I am. Oh, I said. My mistake. My mum and dad are from Coventry, said Emma, dropping back into her regular elocution. Lived there till I was 12. Then had to move here when my gran died. When the guild calls, you can't refuse. So it would seem, I said. I thought about adding that all of my calls from the guild so far had been from her, but dropped it. We'll go over all the formalities at the meeting tonight, said Gilbert. And now that the formal initiation is almost over, we'll get you properly equipped, so you don't need to be rescued again. Almost over? What else do I have to do? Steal the dodo beak from Oxford? Don't be ridiculous, said Gilbert. We have much more experienced people working on that. No, it's just a swearing in and a lot of paperwork. Great, I said. I love paperwork. A shudder ran through me as I remembered the reams of paperwork they had forced me to fill out after Hammond had canned me from my job at RPG Lab last month. For a company with only one female developer, it wasn't a good look to fire said developer, especially after she had just saved the whole team's ass in front of their biggest investor. As much as I wanted to run to the nearest lawyer and file a wrongful termination suit, the severance package they had offered in exchange for my permanent silence on the issue was too good to pass up. You'll be getting a call at the phone tonight at 10:30 with the meeting location, said Emma. Don't be tardy. Can't you just tell me right now? I said. I'm standing right here. Fine, she said. 10:45, under the Bethesda Terrace in Central Park. Thank you, I said. Wait a minute. How are you expecting me to get there from all the way downtown in 15 minutes? You caught me. Wanted to see if your friend had left you any speed buffs. Oh well. Let's get moving, said Gilbert, and the two guild members left me alone with my thoughts and a crate full of apples. That was, until Emma ran back a minute later, her tote bag held open. Sorry, she said. Almost forgot those. Would you mind? What? I asked. You want me to dump all of these into that tiny little bag? It was obviously no ordinary bag, but she didn't know how much I still didn't know about alchemy. If she had pressed me, I would have said that the bottom of the bag was lined with vervorium, just like Polly's shells and those stupid doorknobs. You got it, Emma said with a shit-eating grin. I kicked myself for not pocketing some of the apples when I had the chance, and then reluctantly poured the entire crate into the tote bag, which accepted them without protest. Thanks, love. See you tonight. Emma slung the bag around her shoulder effortlessly and retreated east toward Park Avenue. Where can I get one of those? I called out after her, but she just chuckled and ran off into the morning sun. The city slowly sprung to life as I walked. The supers sprayed their hoses, cleaning the sidewalks as they did every morning. The coffee shops and the bodegas opened their doors, welcoming in their sleepy patrons looking to start their days with a hot cup of caffeine and a muffin. The commuters headed to the nearest subway station or bus stop. 2 years ago, I would have enjoyed this ambling stroll, still blissfully unaware of the shadows of magic that covered the world. Last year, I was too busy questing for wooden and iron tokens to care. And now, more than anything, I wanted to be passed out in my cozy bed in my 5th-floor walk-up with the shades drawn and not wake up for several days. But that wasn't an option for several reasons. First, I obviously had to show up at the meeting point tonight. Second, I had abandoned my old apartment and roommate in the middle of the night several weeks ago, leaving only a cryptic note and a wad of cash to pay the rest of my share of the lease, retreating to a still unfurnished studio in Greenpoint. And finally, because there was work that needed doing. I stopped at a coffee cart on the corner, purchased a large iced coffee, and withdrew a small stoppered vial and plastic eyedropper from my bag. The liquid shimmered a pale green and matched its taste, and I walked over to a bench in front of an empty storefront and carefully uncorked the glass tube. I lowered the tip of the eyedropper into the vial, pulled up a tiny portion of the liquid, and then deposited the liquid into my coffee. Even the 24 ounces of pure caffeine and sugar was not enough to blunt the putrid taste of that one little drop, and I felt my body shudder involuntarily as I drank the entire contents of the cup. Except it wasn't my body. The glamour was still active, and I looked at Jade's reflection in the storefront window, who remained stoic and still while the effects of the vitality serum kicked into high gear. This was a different beast than the one Beatrice had given me that early morning in our old office after our escape from Doug. That serum had operated like a mini volcano, sending an explosion of heat and rejuvenation into every corner of my body. The current serum, though, was more like an everlasting gobstopper. The tiny drop kept on working for 24 hours, giving me just enough energy to keep me balanced on that edge between exhaustion, awareness, and delirium. It was a dangerous game I was playing, because I had no doubt that I was setting myself up for a horrific crash at some far-off point in the future. The recipe I had found tucked under a sliver of carpet in our office on the 47th floor of the Chrysler Building. Everything there had been stripped clean when I finally paid a visit a week after Beatrice's disappearance. Even the vivorium doorknob that formed the gateway to the island house was gone. Maybe she was still holed up there, waiting out the guild, but I had barely had a moment to myself in the past month, let alone the half a day it would take to journey by boat out to the south shore of Long Island. Beatrice's handwriting was neat and concise. Improved vitality serum, it said at the top, followed by a list of ingredients, some mundane, some magical, with a list of complicated steps at the bottom. I didn't know where the hell I was going to get 40 grams of 80-day-old lemon zest, or 80 grams of a 40-day-old cardinal's feather, but fortunately, it only took me a day to notice the seemingly random pattern of underlined letters and numbers in the note. The letters had spelled out toilet tank in hall, and I had sprinted back to the office to find yet another envelope taped inside. Unlike the one she had left me in the bathroom at the Met, this one held only an old key. But much to my disappointment, it wasn't the vivorium key we had used to travel through the Washington Square Park archway. Buoyed by the vitality serum working its alchemy on my exhausted body buried under the glamour, I quickened my pace, eager to get to my current destination before the full morning rush hit. 6th Street was seemingly immune, unlike its brethren, and when I turned off 5th Avenue, I found myself walking down an empty block to the green relay mailbox. I fished the old key out of my purse, inserted it into the rusted lock, and turned. The compartment swung open without complaint, and I smiled as I looked over its contents. This had been the second half of Beatrice's message. The underlined numbers in the recipe had provided the street number, and she had scrawled the street name inside the bottom corner of the envelope. During my first visit here, I had been pleasantly surprised to find containers with enough of the prima materia to make at least several vials of the vitality serum. The hideaway had provided a convenient headquarters of sorts, somewhere that couldn't be tied to Beatrice, to me, or even to Jade. I smiled at Beatrice's ingenuity in coming up with this mailbox of all things as a failsafe, and then shook my head as I considered how far she had fallen from the woman with the secret lab on the Lower East Side, or the woman with her own private island. This was most likely all the remaining help I was going to get from her, and the thought that I was now truly on my own was terrifying. My hand absent-mindedly found its way up to the glamour stone, and I grasped it slightly, and then felt the weight of my counterpart dissolve. With all the commotion in the alley, I had nearly forgotten what Jade had done. Was this what Ty had warned me about when she had given me the stone? I hadn't come across the girl since that morning in the abandoned train station, but her business card was among the items stowed away in the mailbox, along with some peculiarities from my former partner that I hadn't had time to suss out. I pulled out my phone and brought up our previous text conversation, and was about to send another help request, but then thought better of it. The mystery of the glamour would just have to wait until I had someone new from this side of the world that I could really trust. Instead, I withdrew the stack of unmarked bills from the mailbox, put a small sealed envelope in its place, and then locked the compartment again. The envelope I had addressed to Molly Vistret, one of Beatrice's apparent pseudonyms, and the note inside contained a short missive expressing my hope that she was still okay and to contact me if she was able to safely meet. I doubted she would ever read it. The cash, which represented a sizable portion of my severance payment, I stuffed into an envelope and placed at the very bottom of my bag. I surveyed the block to see if anyone had noticed my mailbox hideout, but Beatrice had chosen the location wisely, and the street was still deserted. Satisfied that no one was about to rob me, I retreated toward 6th Avenue and walked south. With 5 minutes to spare, I reached the Rendezvous, a small square in the middle of the West Village, dotted with rotting benches and misshapen cobblestones. I took a seat on one side of a set of back-to-back benches in the middle and waited for Janice to sit down behind me. He had come highly recommended by a number of users in the back corner of Craigslist as one of the best forgers in the city. The cash would pay for the papers that would solidify my double life as Jade Peters: a driver's license, social security number, a passport, and even a rewards credit card with a great sign-up bonus. Maybe I would treat myself to a one-way ticket to Omaha with the miles once I was satisfied that the guild wasn't going to kill me right now. My phone alarm went off, signaling 1 minute until the drop, so I fished out the envelope of cash and bent down to place it under the bench. As I did, though, the glamour loosed itself from under my sweatshirt, and I realized I was still me. I quickly pulled up the hood over my hair and covered my face with one hand, while activating the glamour with my other hand. When I sat up again, I was Jade, my now voluminous red hair spilling down the sides of my face. "Jade," said a gruff voice behind me. "Yes," I replied in Jade's raspy tones. "He's done." I almost turned around to look at Janice, but remembered the explicit instructions not to do that very thing, and instead wait 10 minutes before retrieving the goods. Fine. I had almost the whole day until my next harrowing experience was scheduled to start, so I tried to relax and appreciate the picturesque city park. An old woman sat on a bench at the far side, knitting a golden scarf. It stretched down to her ankles, and it reminded me of the Golden Fleece from the Jason and the Argonauts movie I had watched as a kid. I wondered who she was making it for. A pair of ducks hopped out of the little pond and waddled over to me, almost as if they were trained to expect food whenever someone sat down by themselves on a bench. I flashed my empty hands, and they quacked angrily and scurried back into the water. A breeze swept through the park, and it brought with it a sheet of newspaper. I picked it up to discover that it was from yesterday's Times Style section, and absent-mindedly turned it over to find the featured vows column, and that's when my jaw dropped. The bride and groom stood in the center of a circle of rocks on the outskirts of the woods, surrounded by their wedding party. The women were dressed in bronze sheets of fabric, holding bouquets of dark orange flowers, and the men had matching bronze bow ties. It was all quite ridiculous, and I would have had a good laugh had I not recognized the two women in the center, because staring up at me from the crinkled half-page photo, with half-distant looks in their eyes, were none other than Lisa and Stacy. Chapter 4. Initiation by Fire. Why did I not name myself the heir? Too many questions and no good answers. So Rita spent the last decade of her life, in addition to her political machinations, finding suitable stewards for her legacy. These, other than the foundations, are the only memories she did not commit to writing, and so they remain in my head. Central Park, for all its magnificence during the day, was scary as hell in the night. The great green lawns were empty, as were the jogging trails and the cyclist paths, and the only light in my vicinity came from intermittently spaced street lamps, which, to add another level of terror, flickered randomly whenever I approached. I reached the top of Bethesda Terrace at 10:43, the full moon illuminating the murky waters of the popular rowboating pond below. The figurehead of the eponymous fountain looked up at me with its stone gaze. It was supposed to depict the angel of the waters, but in the ominous glow of the moonlight, I could have sworn that instead it was an Alarian, the sigil of the worshipful company of alchemists, otherwise known as the Guild. I walked gingerly down the steps, Jade's familiar weight pushing slightly against my actual body, and then turned and strode toward the tunnel that ran under the terrace. Decorative columned archways lined the entrance and extended down into the darkness, but of the guild escort that should have been waiting for me, there was no sign. "Hello?" I called out once I had reached the interior of the passageway. "Is anyone there?" Jade's voice echoed down the terrace underbelly, but the only response was silence. I threw back my head in frustration, fighting against the urge to unleash every ounce of fury that had been building up inside me these past few weeks. What was left of my resolve gave way after 3 seconds, and I screamed. When I opened my eyes again, 4 hooded and cloaked figures were standing under the archways, 2 in front of me, 1 to my left, and 1 to my right. They approached slowly, and I swiveled in a circle, looking for a familiar face. But the moon's reflection off the pond was suddenly blinding, and the only thing I could make out were the identical gold clasps that held the cloaks in place. Finally, the figures stopped 3 pieces away and unhooded themselves. One was Gilbert, and one was Emma, which was slightly reassuring, but the other 2 were total strangers. "Jade Peters," said one of them, a man with silver hair and a silver goatee, and a silver cane that had somehow appeared from inside the sleeve of his robe. "That's me," I said. "Present your token," he replied, with a distinctive Texas drawl. I fished my locket out from underneath my jacket and unclasped it. Inside was the gold token that was my entry ticket into the guild. I held it out for the silver-haired man to see, and he stepped forward to grab it from my hand, but I snatched it back from his grasp. "That's not how this works," I said. "My token stays with me. You already know it's real." I turned to look at Gilbert, who nodded in assent. "Fine," said the man. "Luca, the blindfold?" The 4th and final figure, a 30-something woman with glasses and short purple hair, produced a black silk scarf from underneath her robe and handed it to the man, who stretched it out in front of him with both hands, letting his cane fall to the ground. "Is this really necessary?" I said. "I'm afraid it is, Miss Peters," said the man. "Don't worry, though. You'll get your eyes back just as soon as we reach the guild hall." "I'm sorry, what? What do you mean?" The man closed the gap between us in a flash and pushed the blindfold against my eyes, which I closed involuntarily. I felt Jade buckle under the stress of whatever alchemy was contained within the scarf, as if her entire body was about to crack into 1,000,000 pieces. But thankfully, the man pulled back the blindfold after only a few seconds. Except that when I opened my eyes again, the only thing I saw was nothing. They placed a cloak around me, and I did not protest. They pulled the hood up over Jade's fiery hair, secured it with what I imagine was a matching gold clasp, and I did not fight them, as my arms went limp at their sides. They muttered words of an ancient language in unison, and the cloak constricted my limbs. I began to walk, but not of my own accord. The darkness that permeated my field of vision was absolute, and the sheer terror of it had drained all the fight out of me. Even Jade had not been moved by my plight to intervene. Whether that was because I was not truly in danger, or the blindfold had somehow dampened whatever she was, I wasn't sure. But I held on to this glimmer of hope like a drowning woman clutching a sinking life-preserver. We walked in silence up the sloping path along the pond that led away from the terrace, and then up another hill that I knew led toward the Met. Finally, the quiet of the park was broken by the familiar sounds of city traffic, and I surmised that we were close to the Engineers Gate on 90th Street. I felt the ground shift as we moved onto the cobblestone sidewalk that lined the west side of Fifth Avenue. Then my body was directed across the street, down the sidewalk, and then across another street, until we resumed our northward trek on Madison Avenue. What a sight we must have been, 5 robed figures skulking around in the night. But then I wondered if anyone could see us at all. We would be hard to miss otherwise, even at this time of night. Surely the doormen of the Tony Upper East Side buildings we were passing would not keep quiet about such a bizarre tableau, even by New York standards. I wanted to say something, curse these men and women for their treachery, but found the muscles in my throat and my jaw unable to hear my brain's commands. So I gave in and tried to enjoy the only sense left under my control. I should have heard the hum of the air conditioners above my head, the gentle honking of horns, and the screech of tires. But the streets were eerily quiet, and I resigned myself to being trapped in this cocoon until either I was welcomed into the guild or stabbed in the back and pushed into the sewer. I lost track of how far my body had walked, and wouldn't have been surprised to find myself in the middle of the Brooklyn Bridge by the time this was finished. At some point, I felt myself sit down in a comfy chair, and the hood was removed from over my head. As soon as it was, my limbs suddenly fell to their sides, as if the invisible puppet strings had been cut. Then the blindfold was pressed back against my face and quickly removed. I took a few deep breaths, unsure if I even wanted to return to the brightness of the world. But finally, I heard someone clear their throat, and when my eyes fluttered open again, they were all staring at me from around a big wooden table. The man with the silver facial hair, who was now sporting a cowboy hat of all things, sat several chairs away to my left, and the purple-haired woman named Luca, one seat to my left. Emma had taken up a seat opposite the man, and Gilbert was in the middle seat across from me, along with a familiar woman. "Welcome, Jade Peters," said Dahlia DeWick, 13th chairman of the guild, dressed in an elegant black dress with the familiar black stitching, a hint of a smile on her face. "Let us begin, shall we?" Gilbert picked up a piece of paper and began reading. "Roll call. J.P. Laurel, first seat of the orange table. Here," he said. Gilbert made a notation on the paper and then continued. "Emma Patel, second seat of the Pavonia table." Emma nodded. "I need a verbal confirmation," said Gilbert sternly. "Present," said Emma, rolling her eyes. "Dahlia DeWick, first seat of the New Amsterdam table." "Present," said Dahlia. "That leaves me, Gilbert Barbata, second seat of the New Amsterdam table, also present. And as we have 2 first seats present, we have a quorum. So this 432nd meeting of the Worshipful Company of Alchemists shall come to order." He banged a gavel that had somehow appeared in his hand against the table and then sat down. All this talk of tables and seats made me re-examine the wooden table we were sitting at. It wasn't one table, as I originally thought, but 4 that were connected with some sort of gold inlay. The table's outlines were also different. The New Amsterdam table looked almost like the island of Manhattan, but the others were indistinguishable shapes. Behind each table were 3 seats, with everyone sitting in the specific seat that Gilbert had called, which meant that I was slated to be the 3rd seat of the so-called Brukellen table. I took a minute to survey the rest of the room. On my wall to the left were several banners sporting symbols I did not recognize, and on the opposite wall was a series of 4 gleaming metal shields, each with a different crest. Wooden chests were haphazardly pushed against the other nooks in the room, and several half-burned candles provided a dim glow. "Do I hear a motion to dispense with the reading of the minutes from the prior meeting?" asked Gilbert. "I move," said Emma. "Seconded," said J.P. "All those in favor?" asked Gilbert. "Aye," said everyone but me. "Nay?" I said with apprehension. Gilbert frowned. "Jade, seeing as how you are not, at this moment, a member of the guild, you do not get a vote. But you may read the minutes to your heart's content later this evening if you should so choose." "Oh," I said, my face turning red. "Okay." "Good," said Gilbert. "With that settled, let us turn to the 2 matters of new business on tap for tonight's meeting. First, we have a new member to initiate." All eyes suddenly turned to me, and I felt as if they were piercing through the glamour and staring at the real me, an interloper hiding within another interloper. "Jade Peters," said Gilbert. "The membership committee," he gestured to the assembled guild members at the 3 tables, "has considered your membership request. As you know, membership in the Worshipful Company of Alchemists is not something given lightly. We are honored bound to uphold the charter given to the founding 12, to guard, shield, and cultivate the secret of secrets, the ancient art of alchemy. Only those of sound mind, body, and essence are worthy to be inducted into the guild, an appointment that is not only for your lifetime, but for your heir as well, and their heir, and so on." "Can we get on with this?" interjected Emma, who had used the length of Gilbert's speech to remove her robe, revealing a faux leopard bomber jacket and figure-hugging black blouse underneath. Evidently, she had plans later tonight that were about as far as you could get from a meeting of a secret magical society. Everyone ignored the outburst, except Gilbert, who tilted his head slightly in Emma's direction as if she was an annoying fly that would not stop buzzing in his ear. "Second seat, Patel. It seems as if I am keeping you from something more important? Another night of downing tequila at some godforsaken basement bordello, maybe? Or do you have a gentleman caller that we should know about? Well, whichever it is, you may want to put those plans on hold until after we get to the second item of business." Emma glared daggers at him before slinking down in her chair and putting her robe back on. "Now, where was I? Oh, yes, Jade. You have proven yourself worthy of the 3 elements." I tried to piece together which of my trials and tribulations had corresponded to each of these so-called elements, but Gilbert continued his long speech. "And as committee chair, I now pass along the committee's recommendation to the chairman that you be elevated to full guild member." Gilbert produced a piece of paper from his robe and handed it to Dahlia. She considered it, her eyes scanning up and down the page, and I couldn't help but wonder what they had written about me. Finally, she placed the paper down on the table. Thank you, Gilbert, but I'm afraid I will have to reject the committee's recommendation. Chapter 5. Bloodwork. Finding an heir was a harder task than one would think. So many of the old families have daughters who they bred with the sole capability of being sold off like show cows. It is a shame that they wasted such beauty and physique without also cultivating their minds. Such women in ages past have ended dynasties and empires. The spare sons fared no better, spoiled beyond usefulness, like a rotten strawberry. Everyone started shouting all at once. Out of the 6 people present, it was me, surprisingly, who took this new development in stride. JP rose to my defense first, followed by my tablemate Luca. I insist, Dahlia, we put Miss Peters through her paces and— We've adhered to the protocols to the letter, interrupted Luca, and she satisfied them. It is not your place to— Are you serious with this shit? Emma was the most indignant, and I suppressed a snicker as she too made her piece known. It was then that I realized they were not so much defending me and my status as a guild member, but the process itself. After all, if Dahlia could undo all their hard work on nothing more than a whim, what else could she do? Demote them? Revoke their membership entirely? All 3 continued on for some time before Gilbert finally brought the meeting attendees to heel again with several bangs of his gavel. Order, said Gilbert before turning and whispering something to Dahlia, who nodded and then stood. Let's try that again, shall we? As I was trying to say, I cannot accept the committee's recommendation at this time. Ordinarily, yes, your initiation would have been sufficient. In fact, it might even have been a bit overzealous, said Dahlia, looking briefly at Emma before continuing. But this is not an ordinary induction. You, she said, pointing at me, have somehow discovered what was once thought lost forever, the 12th token, and with it, the claim to the 3rd seat of the Bruchellen table that has been vacant for hundreds of years. So the normal set of protocols will not be enough, particularly when you have refused to tell us where it was you found the gold token. I stared at her, unblinking, wanting more than anything to slink down into the robe and let it carry me away from here. I had done everything that was asked of me, and then some, even when it had seemed impossible. What will be enough, then? I finally said, the anger rising in my voice. How about I cut off my own arm and offer that on a silver platter? Would that satisfy you? Dahlia laughed, followed by a smattering of nervous chuckling from the rest of the room. Don't be ridiculous, Jade, she said. That would be a waste of a good limb, and you're going to need it anyway. What are you talking about? You were all so quick to yell and snap and shriek like a bunch of yapping dogs that you didn't let me finish. I only said that I was rejecting your recommendation that Jade be admitted into the guild now. I never said anything about turning you away entirely. Dahlia, this is not proper, said JP. The committee's recommendations have always been respected. You cannot just— What, run the guild on my own? No, unfortunately not. Maybe if I could, then things would be different. What is that supposed to mean? Asked Luca. Enough bickering, Dahlia said. Jade, your admission to the guild is suspended, pending one final task. Complete it and you will be welcomed with open arms. No more hoops to jump through, and no catches. You might even find yourself moving up a seat in the process. What would I have to do? I said, not really wanting to know the answer. Simple. All you need to do is fetch a vial of dragon's blood. You're joking, right? Dragons aren't real. Not that kind of dragon, said Gilbert, removing an envelope from his robe and placing it on the table. It's a red resin, been around for thousands of years. We want you to take the one from the Emerson Pigment Library up in Boston. So you were in on this the whole time? Said JP. Why then did you make us engage in this charade? Why are we even here tonight? You both know that our resources could have been spent dealing with— Stop, said Dahlia, her voice suddenly thunderous. If you must know, JP, you were the one we were going to ask to retrieve the vial. But you've just convinced me it would be a mistake to give you this task. So it will be up to Jade and Emma instead. I'm sorry, Jade and Emma what now? Said Emma. You're daft if you think I'm going anywhere near that vial. You wanted JP to get it, have him go to Boston with the new girl, and leave me out of it. Emma, said Dahlia, your father was the one who located the vial in the first place. It seems only fitting that his eldest daughter and heir to his seat be the one to finish what he started. Is that supposed to make me feel all sentimental or something? You think you can manipulate me that easily? Well, piss off! Dahlia arched her eyebrows and was about to say something when Gilbert intervened. Emma, do not let your father's work die in vain. He wouldn't want that. Don't pretend to speak for him, or for me. With that, she pushed herself up from her chair, threw the hood of her robe over her head, and with a squeeze of the gold clasp, she was gone. The room went silent, save for the slam of the side door that the now invisible Emma had just slammed shut, and we all glanced around the room awkwardly waiting for Dahlia to continue with the meeting's agenda. Instead, she whispered something in Gilbert's ear, who nodded before retreating out the back door without another word. We're done for tonight. Next meeting will be in 4 weeks, said Gilbert, and JP and Luca, too, rehooded and vanished. Jade, stay so I can give you the specifics. The side door opened and shut again, and only then did Gilbert traverse the length of the table and sit down in the empty Pavonia third seat. Do these meetings normally go like that? I asked, and Gilbert let out a chuckle before sliding the envelope toward me. Only on days ending in Y, he said with a half smile. You get a room full of people who are used to not taking no for an answer, and sparks inevitably start to fly. It's a wonder the Guild has gotten anything accomplished in the last 100 years. I opened the envelope and withdrew a single sheet filled with typed letters. The Pigment Library has over 2,000 specimens, said Gilbert as I scanned the paper. We've been able to narrow down the location of the Dragon's Blood Vial to the 4th floor, but the library's index is, unsurprisingly, not publicly available. You'll have to see what you can come up with once you're on the ground in Boston. Okay, I said. Any questions? Only a million. Like, for starters, where the heck are we? I suppose that would naturally be the first question after we basically blinded and kidnapped you. You can see for yourself when you leave, but we're currently in the South Tower of the Madison Avenue Armory. It's been the Guild's headquarters since the mid-60s. You mean that abandoned brick castle on 96th Street? I used to walk by here every week in high school on the way to chess club. Never thought it was anything more than an old relic that the city refused to let anyone tear down. And that's why it makes the perfect headquarters for our organization, said Gilbert. This tower has the meeting room, the library, and Dahlia's study at the top. If you go down to the basement, you can reach the North Tower, which has office space for each member. We've also got some auxiliary locations scattered around the city that we've collected over the years, but unfortunately, you'll have to wait until you become a member to get access to those. Fine. But now that I know about this place, you're just going to let me come and go as I please? Yes. And you can keep the robe too, for now. Put it on somewhere safe and activate it, and then you can enter through the door on the corner of 96th and Madison that we took you through tonight. So you guys are really just walking around with invisibility cloaks like it's no big deal? Do I have that right? Ha! Yes. It's actually a pretty complicated piece of alchemy, but for your purposes, just pull the hood up over your head, grip the gold clasps for a second, and then voila, you're invisible. I tried it for myself and nearly fell backward when my entire body vanished below me. It took me a moment to locate the gold clasps again and undo the alchemy, and I breathed a sigh of relief when the outlines of the robe reappeared along with the rest of me. That will take some getting used to, I said. They're mostly useful at night when there aren't so many people around, said Gilbert. During the day, you'll probably make it about 5 feet before bumping into someone. Also, walking about Manhattan in a full-length black robe in broad daylight will still draw stares, so try to use it sparingly. Understood, I said. All that talk earlier about getting me properly equipped. That went out the window, I assume? Yes, for now. But take the robe. It might be useful for your task, but don't think you're just going to waltz into the library with it on and walk out with the vial. There's a reason that Emerson has been able to hold on to it for so long. That's super helpful, I said. You got any more pointers? Should I duck when the booby-trapped metal blade comes swinging for my head? Go talk with Miss Patel. Despite her performance tonight, she's got a cracking mind, as she would tell you, for sneaking into places where she's not welcome. If you hurry, you can catch her at her usual haunt down in the village. Fine, I'll do that. It's not like I wanted to go to sleep anytime soon. Good, said Gilbert, ignoring my sarcasm. I would suggest that you two head up to Boston as soon as possible. Dahlia will expect you to have retrieved the vial by the next guild meeting. Fan-fucking-tastic. Just so I know what the hell I'm getting myself into. What's so special about this vial anyway? It's the only known remaining sample from the 1652 batch made by George Starkey, said Gilbert, as if I should recognize the name as readily as the President of the United States. Thankfully, he acknowledged my bewilderment without comment and continued. One of the most accomplished alchemists of the past half millennium, and, in a strange coincidence, one of the former occupants of your seat. Oh, I said. That's, interesting. But that still doesn't answer my question. Gilbert's demeanor suddenly spun on a dime, the somewhat friendly chat we were having turning deadly serious. We believe that it's the key to creating a new Philosopher's Stone. Chapter 6. Dream Team. Ultimately, she found her solution in the unlikeliest of places. One day, as she was walking along Wall Street, she happened upon a young girl selling flowers. The bouncer at the door to Firebird eyed my newly acquired fake ID with extreme suspicion before looking me up and down, my hooded sweatshirt and ratty tennis sneakers doing me no favors. But thankfully, Jade's sultry smile opened many more doors than my own could, and the bouncer finally handed the ID back to me and waved me through into the packed house beyond. I spotted Emma sitting at a bar that stretched along the back wall, gentlemen callers on either side, and I approached with trepidation, not knowing how I would be received by the group. Taking the empty stool next to the guy on the left, I made my presence known, only for Emma to roll her eyes and throw back her head. She whispered something into the ears of both guys, and they handed her their phones in unison, into which she dutifully typed a phone number before returning them to their owners. Once the stools were vacated, I slid down one spot and hailed the bartender. "What are you doing here?" she asked before downing the remainder of her clear drink, besides mucking up my plans for later this evening. "It's almost 1:30, I said, my body crying out for the rest I was so reluctantly denying it. "There's not much evening left," says the girl who looked like she's been locked in the library for the past month. "I'm surprised they even let you in here looking like that." The bartender, a tall woman with a pixie haircut wearing a leather vest and sporting piercings up and down her ears, arrived and greeted Emma with a confused look. "What happened to those guys?" "I like the blonde one." "She happened," said Emma, nodding in my direction. "Another Tito's neat for me, if you wouldn't mind, Svetlana. And for your friend?" "She's not my friend. More like a cockblock." "I'll have the same," I said, and the bartender departed. "Of course you would," said Emma, who ignored me until Svetlana returned with our drinks. "You have exactly 5 minutes to tell me what the hell you want. Maybe I could still catch one of the guys before he finds someone else to shag in the bathroom." My eyes widened. "I wouldn't have pegged you as that type of woman." "That's 'cause I'm not," she replied, producing a tube of purple lipstick after fishing around for a few moments in her tote bag from earlier. "One kiss and he'll be unconscious for 6 hours. Can't decide whether to leave him his shirt or his pants. I'm sorry, but this all seems so... Definitely the pants. Only after I've dunked them in the toilet, though, so they're cold and wet when he wakes up." "Wrong. I thought you liked the guy." "That prick sidled up here and cupped my arse within a few seconds of sitting down. Then he suggested that he and his friend take me back to their apartment to I'm sorry I asked," I shouted, turning beet red. "You think he's going to wake up tomorrow morning embarrassed and suddenly become a changed man? Course not. That's why I'm going to send a picture of his half-naked ass passed out to every single person in his company and every single contact in his phone." That sounds like a creative plan. "Anyway, I just wanted to talk to you about our trip to Boston. We've only got 4 weeks to get the dragon's blood, and we don't have anything. I'm going up there in a few days and will return with the vial, somehow, and you will just wait here and beg Dahlia at the next meeting to let you into the guild. Or not. Frankly, I don't give a damn what you do as long as it doesn't involve me." But Dahlia and Gilbert said, "What? That we need to work together to get the job done?" Well, I just spent the last month doing what they told me, and look how that turned out. If they want me to get the vial, then I'm doing it my way. With that, Emma threw down some cash on the bar, applied the lipstick around her mouth, and stormed off in a huff. "She off on one of her revenge missions?" said the bartender, who had returned and was clearing away the column of empty glasses that were arrayed across the bar. "You know what she does? And how she does it?" The bartender smiled. "Who do you think gave her the lipstick?" "Something I worked up in the back, in one of the old kegs. Emma's helping me test it out. Fortunately, well, I guess also unfortunately, this place draws in a ton of assholes, but we're slowly changing that." "That's, very noble of you." Svetlana raised an eyebrow at me. You're new. What happened to the other girl? I don't know. Never met her. Said Svetlana. I've got an extra 2 if you want to go after the second guy. Just do it somewhere else. 1 passed out jackass I could deal with, but 2 in one night will start drawing questions. She dug her hand into one of her vest's pockets, pulled out 3 tubes, and slid them down the bar to me. Why is there 3? I asked, examining the tubes. One's the lipstick, one's a spray to stop you from passing out from the krakoxin in the lipstick, otherwise you'll be waking up around the same time as your target, and the last is a perfume version of the lipstick for when kissing isn't practical. Oh, I said. That makes sense. Thanks. You're welcome. Next time you're in, let me know how it turns out. Svetlana turned to walk away, only for Emma to appear out of the crowd behind me and reclaim her seat. That was fast, said the bartender. Hope he didn't get too grabby before you knocked him out. Nah, said Emma, smiling. I pushed him up against the wall just as soon as we cleared the bathroom door, and he went down like the sack of shit that he is. Also nicked his wallet out of his jeans for good measure. Guess we're going up to Beantown for free. You came around quick, I said, secretly thankful that I didn't have to beg Emma to actually do what the guild was asking. Well, taking down that asshole 40 rungs will do that to you. Don't make me regret it, though. And we'll be catching the 7 a.m. Masala, yeah? So go home and pack some stuff, and I'll see you in the lounge in a few hours. The rest of the night was a complete blur, as was getting to Penn Station and getting on the train. It wasn't until we were well past New Haven that my mind came to, and I looked across the table to see Emma pass out with her mouth wide open, spittle dripping down her face. Of course. I hadn't wanted to argue with her over the quick turnaround, not with her grudging decision to work together on what I had dubbed our epic quest. But there was only so much more my body could take, both with the constant running on adrenaline and the glamour almost always on, and I dreaded the inevitable crash that was approaching. I pulled out my laptop, opened up an empty text file, and wrote, Steal the dragon's blood at the top. Then I unhelpfully added 4 bullet points. Gain access to the library, locate the dragon's blood, remove the vial, escape without getting caught or killed. So simple. In the rush to leave, I managed to pack my invisibility robe, as Gilbert had advised, my trusty vial of vitality serum, and Svetlana's lipstick. But after those items and my glamour, I was plumb out of alchemic tricks. I considered whether I could use the robe and glamour in tandem. I could enter as Jade, disappear, and then reappear as myself somewhere else. At best, though, it was a diversion, and would additionally require an awkward conversation with Emma, where I would have to convince her that my actual body was the glamour, like Zoe had mistakenly thought back in the alley. Emma at least bought some additional firepower, with White Hilt, the giant sword, and whatever else was in that bag of hers. I contemplated rifling through it while she was still passed out, but thought better of it. Who knew what crazy shit was hiding in there? I decided I would concentrate my efforts on the access and locating steps. Fortunately, at my first job out of college, the higher-ups had seen fit to hire a battery of penetration testers and social engineers to challenge our IT security. Truth be told, that company wouldn't have been on anyone's radar to steal from, but the CIO needed to justify his existence, and so for weeks we were all on edge while we waited for the red team to infiltrate us. And I had witnessed how miserably we had failed in both waves of the attack. But now those agonizing weeks of training afterward were about to prove very useful. The library, of course, wasn't open to the public, other than a small exhibit in the building's lobby with some historical pigments. I highly doubted our quarry was stored there, but it would at least give us one free visit to survey the layout of the building and observe the security, to see if we could talk our way in pretending to be grad students doing research for our theses, or if more fulsome cover identities would be required. What happened? Emma's head slumped forward, and she startled herself awake, turning away to surreptitiously wipe the drool off her chin. Good morning, sunshine, I said, shaking my head. Thanks again for making us take the early train, by the way. Emma straightened herself out and looked out the window, the sunlight hitting her in the face, and she flung the curtains shut with a flourish. If we waited any longer, we wouldn't have time to get to Al's for lunch. It closes at 2 on Tuesdays, she said matter-of-factly. What are you talking about? I responded, nearly ready to tear Jade's hair out. It's a sub shop. Best subs on the East Coast, in my opinion. Are you fucking serious? I felt something in my head snap, and the blood rushed to my fists, but Emma just sat there, straight-faced. Finally, as I was about to reach over the table and shake her by the collar, a small smile crept across her mouth, and she burst out laughing. Ah! You should see yourself right now. That was great. But seriously, we should definitely go there for lunch. Their Italian sub is... I stormed out of my seat, nearly tripping over myself, and didn't look back as I made my way to the cafe car and away from Emma's laughter. After ordering a ridiculously large iced coffee, I sat down at one of the stools and buried Jade's face in her elbows. Hey, said a voice next to me. I ignored it until I felt someone poking me in the ribs. Leave me alone, I said, until I finally looked up, expecting to see Emma, but instead finding a woman with frazzled blonde hair and familiar green eyes. Beatrice? Chapter 7. Madame Mask. Rita was not stupid. She knew it was a con, but she wanted to see how clever a con the girl had conjured. Beatrice, is that really you? I repeated her name again, not quite believing what I was seeing, but she just stared at me, her eyes sharp as icicles. Finally, another jab hit my midsection, and I lurched awake, my former mentor gone. In her place was the punk-ass girl who had been tormenting me for 24 straight hours, the neck of an open bottle of beer in between her fingers. What do you want? I said, taking a big sip of the now watered-down coffee. Just want to talk. Feel like I got us off on the wrong foot, what with sending you into the vulture's alley and then acting like a total git after Dahlia went off script. Does she do that a lot? I asked. My 3 interactions with her had thus far not been overly pleasant. The first had been at the Met lecture. I hadn't actually spoken to her that night, but I now surmised it wasn't a coincidence that she and Gilbert had been there when we had stolen the Vervorium doorknobs. The second had been at the guild summons. Beatrice and I had walked into that conference room in Midtown, not knowing what or who to expect. She had seemed pleasant enough, until she had threatened us with one of the long-lost crown jewels of the United Kingdom. And now she had upended everything again. Buggered if I know, said Emma. She's barely been at the guild meetings I've been at, save for the last 2. You must bring out something in her. What do you mean? Emma took a swig of beer, and I was about to chide her for drinking at this early hour, but held my tongue. Can't remember the last time there was a full meeting of the guild called. But a month ago, we get a message in the middle of the night telling us to report to the hall with our gold tokens to boot, for a full accounting. Oh, I said. Then we get word that there's been a new member that's come forward, except it's not for one of the current seats. It's the fabled, long-lost 3rd seat of the Brooklyn table. Don't you mean Brooklyn? I interjected. No, it's pronounced Brooklyn, the original Dutch settlement in what's now Brooklyn. The tables represent the settlements where the founding guild members were from. Pavonia, my table, that was the original name for Jersey City and Hoboken. Orange is up near Albany, and obviously New Amsterdam was on Manhattan Island. So your family has been in the guild this whole time? Not exactly. Anyway, I looked at your notes after you ran away. Seemed like you have some good ideas about how we're going to pull this off. I want to hear more about these cover identities. I assume yours would involve the glamour you're hiding under there? What? I said, instinctively looking down at the chain around my neck. I heard Zoe rambling about it while I was hiding in the garage, waiting for the right moment to emerge. Also, it's fairly obvious. I could feel the weight of it pressing down on you. Oh, I replied. Yeah, I guess that will be part of it. Hadn't thought it all the way through yet. And what do you mean you can feel it? With these, Emma said, holding up her left hand, which sported a set of silver rings. They're made of druthyl. Acts like a metal detector of sorts. Whenever there's alchemy nearby, they vibrate, and then change colors to indicate the type of alchemy present. Definitely going to need them to avoid any traps in the library. Gotcha. And the rings on your other hand have origin that is linked to Whitehilt. That's how you're able to pull it out of Zoe's hand. Exactly. That wasn't what they were originally intended for. It's really a throwing knife, despite its size. With the rings, I can retrieve it in the middle of a fight. Let me ask you something, though. What does it feel like? What does what feel like? When you have the glamour on. Oh, I said. It was disconcerting, having people think that my real body was actually the glamour. Maybe this is what Ty had meant when she said not to activate the stone so much. Maybe that is why Jade had somehow emerged and taken control of the glamour. But these were questions for another time, and I promised myself to take off the stone as soon as possible. It's like wearing a heavy blanket at first. You feel like you're dressed up as a ghost, and that it's so obvious that the illusion is fake. But then, over time, it becomes a form-fitting costume, and then eventually a second skin. And now I don't even really notice it anymore. Emma was hanging on my every word, and I was glad for once to be the one who didn't know what the heck they were talking about. So, is it... what? A guy or a girl? A girl, I said. It's nothing crazy if that's what you're thinking. She looks like a normal 20-something with brown hair. Perfect. Emma suddenly grabbed my hand and stared deep into my eyes. I love a brunette. I don't even... What? The words stumbled out of my mouth, and I wrenched free from Emma's grip and jumped up from the bar stool. Ha! Just messing with you. Don't be such a prude. Seriously, though, can you show me her? Now? I asked, looking around the car and finding it empty except for the distracted cafe worker. The last thing I wanted was Emma's rings to go silent when the glamour deactivated, and her to realize the truth about me. I didn't know what repercussions that would have with the guild, and didn't want to find out. You don't have to, said Emma, sensing my hesitation. We can wait until later, when no one will. No, it's fine. Just try not to yell, and I'm only activating it for a second. I pulled up the hood on my sweatshirt to cover Jade's bright red hair, hoisted up the chain of the glamour necklace, and squeezed the green stone. Nothing happened. I squeezed it a second time, muttering under my breath, but still, Jade's grip on my body would not let up. Something wrong? Asked Emma. Maybe. Usually it activates no problem. Let me try another way. I grabbed the glamour again with one hand, pretending to activate it, and at the same time reached behind my neck to undo the clasp. After a minute of blind fidgeting, I finally freed the other end of the chain, and the stone fell down into the confines of my sweatshirt. But when I looked at my hands, they were still covered in freckles, and the strands of the hair I had tucked into my hoodie were still red. It was then that I felt her take control, just for a second, to curl her mouth into a smile. What's so funny? Nothing, I said, pushing back against the glamour and suppressing the urge to scream. Damn thing won't work. I reached down under my sweatshirt and retrieved the stone, reattaching it around my neck. Said Emma, looking around the confines of the car. Might be the work of a nullifier. A what? An alchemy nullifier, deprodium, more specifically, stops all alchemy within a certain range from working for a set period of time. It's used as a defense mechanism usually. Maybe another journeyman is also on this train. And a journeyman is? It's what we call the high-level questers who aren't in the guild, said Emma. Oh, I said. But your rings are still working, aren't they? And that Mary Poppins bag of yours? You have a lot to learn, Jade. A week in the guild library would go a long way, if they ever let you in there. Origin and Vivorium are in the class of persistent prima materia. They're always on, for lack of a better word. Whatever powers your glamour, powerful as it might be, still needs to be activated, and the nullifier stops that. I see. Well, if I can't get it working, we'll need to adjust the plan. The robes will become more important. Agreed, said Emma. And my bag. What about it? You'll see, she said with a wink while downing the rest of her beer. I'm gonna go back and take a little nap. Want to have a productive afternoon after lunch. Fine, I said. Wait. Emma turned around and gave me a quizzical look. What? She asked. Were you there? I said, my voice trembling slightly, nearly holding back the question I had been waiting all day to ask. Was I where? She replied. Were you there? I repeated. When they stabbed Steve with your knife? Emma swallowed and blinked several times before answering. Yes, she said blankly. And I was the one who did it. Everyone wears a mask. It's the makeup we apply, the outfits and accessories we carefully assemble, the hair we crimp. It's in the way we talk, the stories we embellish, the histories we retroactively edit. We hold tight to that mask because it's the only thing protecting that tiny piece of yourself that you keep deep down in the recesses of your mind that you're afraid to reveal to anyone. I've worn that mask. I pretended to fit in with Lisa and Stacy. It was painful at first, but I got good at playing the part. Then the same thing again with Duncan. But mine was different. Because it wasn't guarding that last sliver I was too scared to share with them, lest they judge me, or reject me, or shun me altogether. No, what I was hiding was that it wasn't there at all. I had spent years trying to convince myself otherwise, that I was too damaged, too broken by my mother's death to have anything left inside. And now, the mask I wore was someone else entirely. I stared up at the ceiling from the enormous bed that took up most of the posh hotel room and pulled out the glamour. My fingers turned red as I squeezed it over and over, with the same result as before. After the 20th time, I finally broke down and began sobbing into one of the decorative pillows. "Give me my body back," I whispered, baiting whatever Jade was to take control again and explain herself. But she refused the call. "Have it your way, then," I said out loud. I pulled out my phone, opened my contacts, scrolled down to the name I was looking for, and before I could convince myself otherwise, started a video call. "Pick up, damn it," I muttered to myself in that raspy voice that I hated more and more each time I opened my mouth. I held the phone out in front of her face, her green eyes staring back at me. Finally, after the 7th ring, a chime went off, and a girl appeared on the screen. "Jen, is that you?" said Ty Anzio. "Of course it is," I said. "Who else would it be? You're the one who gave me this." I pulled the chain up over my head again and held out the stone in front of me. It swayed back and forth, as if the gem was trying to hypnotize me, and I closed my hand around it and chucked it across the bed. "What did you do?" said Ty, her eyes wide. The audio crackled, and from what I could see behind Ty, it looked like she was in a crowded school cafeteria. The long brown hair she had sported during our prior encounters was gone. One side of her head now shorn down to a buzz cut, and the other featuring tapered layers of black hair. It made her look like a goth kid who was trying too hard. "Where are you?" I asked, ignoring her question. "And what happened to your hair?" "Oh, you like?" said Ty, tucking the black strands behind her right ear. "Seeing if it will catch on with the seniors." "Wait, you're actually still in high school? I thought you were just dressing the part." "I come and go as I please," she answered. "No one really pays attention to me here, so it suits me. But back to you. You ignored my warning, didn't you?" "Maybe," I said. "What exactly is happening to me?" I didn't want to admit what else Jade had done, and frankly, I was ready to return the blasted stone to Ty in an instant and deal with the repercussions if it meant getting my body back. "Do you know what a glamour is?" Ty asked. It's an alchemy-based illusion. It projects the image and sound of a person." "That's what it does," she answered. "Not what it is. There is a difference, and it explains everything." "Well, don't keep me in suspense here. It's not like I've been possessed by a body snatcher." "Actually, that's exactly what happened, Jen. Because that glamour I gave you, it's not a stone. It's a person." Chapter 8. Sins of the Past. So she bought a bouquet and went on her way. Upon reaching her townhouse without incident, she felt a slight pang of disappointment. Until later that night, when she heard the stone at her doorway sound, and so she slowly descended to the ground floor. "Why'd you do it?" I said to Emma the next morning at breakfast in the hotel lobby, after a nearly sleepless night trying to wrestle with what Ty had told me. There was little she could do for me, she explained, until we could meet in person, so I had tucked the piece of information away in the back of my head and tried to focus on the task at hand. Emma ignored me and continued steeping her black tea before squeezing the bag against the side of the cup and then adding a lump of sugar. "Sorry?" she finally replied, after indulging in several sips. "Why did you stab Steve with White Hilt? I saw the scar, and I saw what's happened to him since. Don't even know if he's still alive at this point." "Serves the fucker right," said Emma, taking a casual bite of the large biscuit she had ordered. as if we weren't discussing how she'd inflicted a horrible, deadly curse on someone. You Americans know how to make a proper scone. Was never one for crumpets or pikelets. In Coventry, the only thing my mom would get was these clanger knockoffs. They were absolutely terrible. What the hell is wrong with you? I said, slamming my palm down on the table, which drew stares from the surrounding patrons, but not Emma. She instead picked up her knife and spread a generous helping of the salted creamy butter on the remaining half of her biscuit. Nothing, said Emma, suddenly changing her grip on the utensil and pointing it at me. Stop meddling in things that don't concern you. If we're going to work together, I need to know why. And they do concern me. Because of what you did, I nearly lost everything. Fine, she said, but no more questions about anything. I nodded in agreement. He was trying to sell us. What? I said. My former mates. We were young and dumb and trying to take over more of the alchemy black market, and he came calling with a new designer drug. One hit and you felt unstoppable, both figuratively and literally. And it worked wonders. Until one night, we got back from a raid, and Callie starts going all wide-eyed and crazy, and then... Emma looked away for a moment, and I stared down at my empty coffee cup while she composed herself. She was gone. Her body and brain were still working, but what made her Callie? It was burned out of her. By the drug. She just stood against the wall in the alley. For days. And then he shows up with his stupid green sweater and a leering grin, and Callie stirs to life immediately, like a robot receiving a command, and runs to his side. We were all meant to end up like that, sold off, as compliant husks to the highest bidder, if Callie hadn't OD'd and made us realize what was happening first. So yes, I stabbed him with White Hilt, and I wish I had finished him there. I stared at her, my mouth gaping open, a knot in my stomach from the nightmarish tale she had just revealed. This world that I had thought I had a grasp on was always finding new ways to show me how little I knew. And that, coupled with the revelation from last night, nearly made me vomit in terror. What's on the agenda for today? Asked Emma, as if she hadn't just told me one of the most horrific stories I've ever heard. We're going to do a bit of sightseeing around town, I said. It's part of Phase 1 of my infiltration plan. You got the glamour working, I assume? No, unfortunately, I said. Then what? Emma said, with an irritated tone. Just yesterday you didn't even know this place existed. My dad spent years tracking down this vial to the exclusion of everything else. They're not going to let us waltz in there and take it. On that point, I agree. First, though, we need to find out where the vial is being stored by accessing their internal computer network. Then once we know where it is, we come back for the retrieval. And I suppose you have a plan for that too? No, I said. That I will be relying on you for. And figuring out how to disarm any traps or wards or whatever alchemy is guarding the vial. Ugh, fine. I'll work on it, but I'll need some time. That's okay, because Phase 1 will take at least a week. How do you like these, by the way? I pulled a set of blonde wigs out of a bag sitting under the table and held them up for Emma to see. I'm good, thanks, she said. But I think you'd look okay as a blonde. Doesn't class too much with those freckles. Thanks, I think. Well, if you're not going to wear a wig, then an enormous sun hat, sunglasses, and some bright lipstick are in your future. If you could talk without your accent, like you did on the phone before, then that would help even more. I thought the point was not to stand out, said Emma. No, that's for Phase 2. In Phase 1, you are going to be invited into the library as an honored guest, with me playing the role of your overworked and mistreated assistant. I don't understand. Say hello to your cover identity, Zazie Scott, makeup expert and influencer. I handed her my phone, which displayed a brand new Instagram account for the persona I had created earlier this morning. You're joking. Nope. The library has a lot of pigments that were used for makeup hundreds of years ago. Zazie is going to be launching her own line this fall. This will be perfect synergy. Sure, theoretically, but this Zazie person you've dreamed up has no influence over anyone. Not even a single picture or follower. It's only 11, I said. By tomorrow morning, you'll have hundreds of posts and 100,000 plus followers to boot. How? What kind of assistant would I be if I couldn't deliver that? Today, though, we need to actually take some real photos about town for some authenticity. This is getting ridiculous. I'm not doing that. You have nothing to lose if this doesn't work. Me? I stand to lose everything. Tell me, what will Dahlia do to me if we fail? Well, said Emma, pausing to take a sip of tea and a bite of her biscuit, your token will be given to someone deemed worthy. Then I imagine your memory of the past month will be erased, hopefully in a pleasant manner, and you'll either wake up in your bed or in a mental institute, depending on how she's feeling that day. Wow, I said. That was worse than I was expecting. Yes, said Emma. But point taken. We'll try it your way. For now. And I guess I'd rather have you in the third Brukellen seat. The devil you know. I'll take that as a compliment, I said. Finish up your breakfast then. Fenway Park awaits. 6 hours and even more outfit changes later, we made our way through the double doors of Quincy Market. Despite her earlier hesitancy, Emma leaned into the role of Zazie with aplomb, and by the third stop on our Beantown tour, we had groups of teenage girls eyeing our photo shoots, wondering who we were. One more in the center of the building should do it, I said as we walked past busy food stalls on either side. No, said Emma, who was currently sporting the oversized sun hat from earlier, along with a long floral sundress and platform heels, which couldn't have been comfortable. Fine, I said. We can rest a bit on those benches. I'm not tired. We just have other business in here, and I don't want to be seen like this. Wait here. Emma walked off to the bathroom, and I puzzled over what she could be talking about until she emerged in her original outfit from this morning. Her prior set of clothes no doubt tucked away in her tote. This way, she said. She's down at the other end. Who is? I asked, but didn't receive a response. The east end of the hall transitioned from food to clothing and accessories, and I wondered if Emma had gone fully into character and wanted to buy an entirely new ensemble for the last photo. But we soon stopped in front of a stand full of random knickknacks and souvenirs, and my confusion only grew when Emma motioned over the teenage girl behind the counter. Maud here? Asked Emma, and the girl shook her head from side to side. No, ma'am. She's off today, the girl said in a thick Boston accent. Of course. Nikki Serrata, is it? Emma said, reading off the name tag that hung on the girl's overalls. You have license to show us around? 'Cause I really don't want to have to come back tomorrow. Not sure what you're getting at, ma'am, Nikki replied. Everything we got here is on display. Is that so? Emma reached into her jean pocket and quickly withdrew a small object, which she plunked down on the counter. I peered over her shoulder to see what it was. A silver token with the familiar Ilarion sigil etched in the middle. The salesgirl's face lit up with recognition, and she nodded silently before raising up a section of the counter and retreating to the back of the stand. Emma retrieved the token and walked through, and I followed, still unsure exactly what was going on. At the rear, we found Nikki crouched down, fumbling with something on the floor. It was a hatch, and when she opened it, a foul smell emerged from the black hole hiding underneath. Be careful as you go down, called Nikki, who had already begun her descent. Emma found her footing on the set of stone steps that corkscrewed down into the darkness, and I had no choice but to join her. Thankfully, dim lights shone up from somewhere below, because otherwise I would have tumbled over the side of the railless stairway. I reached the bottom and found myself in the middle of a long hallway, barely 4 feet across, lit by pairs of familiar red stones on either side. Where are we? I asked as Nikki escorted us down the corridor. This passageway leads us down to the original basement of Faneuil Hall. We moved here in 1762 after a group of anti-witch zealots burnt down the hall the year before. Probably the only time those idiots ever got anything right. My American history is a little rusty, I said. But who is the we you are referring to? Nikki turned around to give Emma a look as if to say, Who is this moron you brought down here? But Emma just shrugged her shoulders. The Dutch West India Company, the shop girl eventually replied as we reached the end of the corridor, which culminated in a worn wooden door. In those days, the alchemy arm of our operations was run more out in the open. People viewed it as more hokey science or superstitious junk, like those fake cures they now sell at the back of magazines. But then there was that whole burning down the hall thing I mentioned a second ago, so we thought it would be wise to move underground. So you work for the guild then? Not exactly, she said, producing a keyring from her overalls pocket. We were spun off as a separate enterprise in the early 1800s. The guild wanted to focus on its questing and magic hunting, and we were left to keep the alchemy economy running. Let me guess, I said. You guys came up with a really clever name like The Market or something. Ooh, close, said Nikki. We are the Night Market, Boston branch. And yet, I said, it's only 5 p.m. Well, a night market sounds better than plain old market, or so I was told. You could probably find the full account of how the name was chosen in the guild minutes from... Enough, interjected Emma. We just need some basic supplies and a bit of alkahest. Nikki ignored the demand and opened the locked door with a loud click before placing her palm on the wall just to the left of the door frame. Suddenly, the room beyond sparkled to life, and my jaw nearly dropped at what I saw inside. A veritable bazaar of oddities, jars, vials, weapons, and shiny objects that made Beatrice's downtown laboratory look like a little tyke's workbench. Your noob is showing, said Emma, nudging me in the ribs, and I quickly shut my gaping jaw. Act like you've been here before, yeah? Yes, Miss Scott, I replied, and Emma rolled her eyes as she followed Nikki into the wondrous cavern beyond. Chapter 9. Shop Talk. Climbing through the window was a boy who appeared to be the same age as the girl, bearing similar features. On his wrist was a glowing bracelet. She kept out of sight and watched as he quickly surveyed the foyer before grabbing an impressive-looking but not particularly valuable vase, where she had placed the flowers. Even with everything I had been through, the alchemy I had witnessed, and the secrets about the world I had learned, there was something about walking down a hidden passageway to find an honest-to-goodness magic shop lurking in the shadows of an old building that made me giddy like a schoolgirl. But before I could even get situated, Emma and Nikki had already begun haggling over the price of the goods we required. We're always happy to extend a line of credit to the guild, Miss Patel, Emma Patel, second seat of the Pavonia table. Patel. That name sounds familiar. Oh, you're the daughter of Akash Patel? I remember he came in here a few years ago when I just started working here after school. How is he? He's dead, but thanks for asking. Anyway, you were saying something about a line of credit? I didn't think the going rate for alkahest was that high. What's alkahest? I asked, and Emma rolled her eyes at my ignorance. Alkahest is the universal solvent, said Nikki. Dissolves anything it touches except bark spider silk, which is used to line the vial. And unfortunately, yes, there's been a dwindling of the quota that VAC releases to the market, and we can only buy so much. At the risk of my friend's eyes falling out the back of her head, I said, What exactly is VAC? Van Ash Corporation, said Nikki. I swallowed hard at the name. Van Ash Corporation could only mean one thing, that Rita Von Ash's legacy had lived on well past her death. And if this company wasn't part of the guild proper, it meant one more player out there in the shadows, along with whomever Frankie had been working for. They have a monopoly on some of the most valuable prima materia. Obviously, we have a lot of purchasing power, but there's only so much we can push. If you're done with the history lesson, Emma said, just tell me how much. 800 silver if you want the whole vial, said Nikki. Or 100 silver for a milliliter, but you need to bring your own vial. Are you fucking kidding me? Said Emma. It was 50 silver a vial last year in New York. I'm sorry, ma'am, said Nikki. As I said, the supply on the market has constricted, and we can't... Yeah, you need to make a living. But the guild will have my head if I go running up a line of credit like that without getting sign-off first. Let me get someone on the phone. Emma stormed out of the shop, and I heard her footsteps echo down the dark hallway until she was no longer visible. You have a branch in New York? I asked. Nikki nodded. Yep. Here, this lists all our locations, hours, and proprietors. She handed me a small laminated card with a picture of a woman standing in front of a row of tents in what looked like Union Square. I flipped it over to find the words, Welcome to the Night Market, written in flourishing script at the top, followed by a long list covering every major city in the country and some minor ones as well. But it was the one in the middle that caught my eye. "I've been to this one," I said, pointing at the New York entry, which listed a certain stall in Hunts Point Market in the Bronx, and a certain proprietor with half-moon spectacles and a very pronounced slouch. "You've met Phineas? He's a legend. My grandmother had a tryst with him when she was my age, or so she claims. What's he like?" "He got the better of me. Ended up trading everything I had, and what I received wasn't enough." I recalled the healing serum briefly curing Frankie, her cryptic words about the pearl and the triangle, and then the horror I felt as she turned back to stone. That had cost me Beatrice's entire supply of the mind-reading apples, and all it had bought us was the location of the fake gold token. And that token had literally exploded in our faces, leading to Beatrice's current exile. So needless to say, my past experience with the night market had not been a good one. "Oh, well, he and my grandma are alike in that respect. They think we're still back in the days of haggling and the capo di fiori. Me, I like to take a more collaborative approach. Why make an enemy out of a customer over a single deal when there's a lifetime of transactions to be had?" "Sure, I guess. While we're standing here waiting for Miss Patel to finish whatever she's doing, do you have any glamours in your inventory that I could take a look at?" "Ooh, wish we did. You don't find those just lying around in the art market, I'm afraid." "Why not?" I asked. I thought they were relatively common. This was not an unreasonable proposition, what with how Ty had straight up given me one, and how Doug had coincidentally also had one. But now I knew there was more to the glamour than your typical mixture of prima materia. No, they are most certainly not. I wouldn't quite characterize them as relic class objects, but it's a close call. Don't think there's been a new one created in at least 100 years. What? Yeah, well, ever since the Treaty of Verdun outlawed alchemic experimentation on humans, it's not exactly like people are shouting from the rooftops that they've transmuted one. Oh, right, I said, pretending I knew what the Treaty of Verdun was. Thankfully, Emma saved me from asking any further embarrassing questions when she returned to the shop with a flourish. "Let's go," she said to me. "But what about the alkahest?" I said. "Did the guild—" "We can talk about it over dinner. Thank you, Nikki. We'll be back." "I'll show you both out." No need. We know the way." And then she grabbed me by the arm, and the magic shop faded from view as quickly as it had appeared. "Of all the great restaurants in the city, this is where we have to go?" I said, as a waitress arrived with 3 plates of oversized sushi stuffed with tuna and peanuts. "First of all, don't insult the tuna peanut roll. It's amazing, especially with the sauces on the side. Second, the booths in here are very comfortable. And third, we're guaranteed not to be seen by prying eyes." I turned around to scan the crowded restaurant, and, sure enough, the table and booth arrangement was such that every diner was focused on their own meal. "Fine," I said. "But why did you order 3 of these? They're enormous." "One for you, one for me, and one for him," said Emma, pointing behind me. I turned around to see the smiling face of J.P. Laurel making his way through the maze of tables toward us. "What is he doing here?" I asked. "I invited him." "Just now? When you went to call the guild?" "No," said Emma. "Please, we all don't have hordes of Aurorium at our disposal. We had scheduled this back in New York." "What? Why?" I whispered as J.P. drew closer, his silver cane in his right hand and that ridiculous cowboy hat still on his head. "Because if it's a choice between you and him, no offense, I would choose him. You have a lot of spunk, I'll give you that, but you're still so— J.P.!" "Emma dear," said J.P. with a warm smile on his face that soon turned to a slight grimace when he met my eyes. "And Jade, you're here." "When did you get to town?" Emma asked, ignoring J.P.'s displeasure at my presence. "Took the shuttle up this morning," he said, sliding into the empty spot in the booth. "There were a number of historical sites in and around the city that I've been meaning to visit. It was rather enlightening. There is so much we still don't know about the early days of the guild during the Revolution." JP picked up one of the sushi pieces, dipped it in the orange sauce, and then popped the whole thing in his mouth before waving off Emma's offer of chopsticks. No need. Ever since I got back from Kyoto, I only use my fingers." Suit yourself, said Emma. So, I still have a tiny bit of alkahest left from Budapest, but I don't think it will be enough. And before I borrow the money from you to pay for a fresh vial, I wanted to be sure it was worth it. Have you given some more thought to my plan? Yes, I have, and I think it's lacking in both practicality and creativity. You all aren't just going to be able to waltz into the library, pour some alkahest on the box, and waltz out with the vial of dragon's blood. Come on, Emmy. I know you have a better head than that. I snickered at the nickname, and they both glared at me. And what, pray tell, are you laughing at? Asked JP. I don't think you realize how fortunate you are that Emma here even let you come on this raid. If it was me that Dahlia paired you with, I would have slipped something in your drink at the start, and by the time you woke up, I'd already be on my way back to New York with the vial. JP, enough. Jade here actually has come up with a very clever infiltration plan. It's me that's lagging. I looked over Da's notes 100 times. Blunt force seemed like the only thing he hadn't considered. Yes, well, you do that and the box will probably implode, taking you and half the block with it. Fuck, that's what I thought. But don't worry, your Uncle Jippy has come to the rescue in your direst time of need. I looked at Emma, expecting her to snap at his blatant condescension, but all I saw was warm admiration on her face, as she picked up a piece of sushi with her chopsticks and started smearing it with both of the sauces. Whatever this relationship was between them, it was deeper than I had realized. Thank you, JP. So, what's the plan? It's simple, really. We create a replica of the box, and then swap it with the real one, which you'll put into your bag. And then one of my people will be waiting to extract it on the other end immediately. Emma paused for just a second, and the sushi fell from her chopsticks, but she quickly picked it up and ate it in one bite. How? Well, the abrupt distance separation could, in theory, break the origin link, but that still doesn't solve the problem of actually opening the box. Trust me, darling, that bitch won't care if we hadn't opened the darn thing, long as we have it. We'll figure out that part later if need be. Then you think? Yes, this was meant as a fool's errand for all of us. You included, Miss Peters. My head popped up at the mention of my fake last name, and I hesitated slightly before deciding to risk further embarrassment. Your bag. It's linked to a place? Emma and JP both shot looks at each other before JP nodded. Yes, said Emma, sliding one of her ring-adorned hands toward me on the table. My family's ancestral domus. These rings, and others, help pull free whatever I need at the moment. And it exists in a real place, like it's some sort of storage unit? Not something so obvious, but yes, and we guard the location of the physical entrance from all others. Which you can wipe from my associate's pretty little head just as soon as he gets back from wherever that is, said JP. It's somewhere in India, I imagine. I saw Emma start to shake her head, but she stopped herself before completing the thought. Don't. And my family hasn't lived there in 7 generations. My apologies, said JP. I just wanted to know what sort of travel time we were dealing with. I need some time. We've never. I understand, and remain at your disposal, Emmy dear. Now, I hate to eat and run, but I need to be getting back to the missus. We'll talk tomorrow once you've had the night to think it through. JP leaned over to give Emma a kiss on the cheek, which she received with a slight smile, before he tipped his hat to me and stalked off. I excused myself a minute later to use the restroom, but when I returned, Emma was staring off into space. Are you okay? I asked with trepidation as I slid back into the booth. She didn't acknowledge my presence, and I looked down to see that her hands were trembling. I'll just go pay then. Do you want me to? You know what? I'll see you back at the hotel. A different me would have stayed, would have tried to coax the source of her angst out of her, so I could offer some words of comfort. The current incarnation of myself, however, wanted to give her a slice of the lone mind-reading apple left from my visit to the orchard that was tucked in the recesses of my bag, and force my way into her thoughts for my own edification. I felt my hand slipping quietly down to my side and brushing against the false bottom. Whether it was directed by my baser self or by Jade, I wasn't sure, but I didn't want to stick around to find out. So I took the coward's way out and left the sobbing girl to her troubles and her sushi. Chapter 10. Black Hat. She let him continue, but he seemed skittish and soon retreated. The next day, she returned to the girl and asked to see her brother, but the girl feigned ignorance. I didn't see Emma again for 3 days, which was fine because we wouldn't be ready for our first run at the library until next week, as I needed to finish uploading the posts from our photo shoot to Zazzy's Instagram account, in addition to the fake photos I had created showing her in various cities around the world. And also because all the stress of the past few weeks had finally caught up to me, as each night's sleep was worse than the last. By Saturday morning, it felt as if I was back in college on the tail end of an all-nighter. "I'd like to read your dad's notes," I said, somewhat surprised to see her at the restaurant when I arrived, after I had spent an hour in front of the mirror trying yet again to deactivate the glamour, even for a few minutes. Her usual breakfast of a black tea and American biscuit was already finished, and she looked up at me as if she was in a haze. "What?" "Your dad's notes, about the dragon's blood," I said. "Maybe there's something else there." "What?" she repeated. "Oh, his notes. He didn't have any." "What do you mean?" I asked. Dahlia said, "Dahlia is a twat, and didn't know my dad from Adam. He didn't keep his research and notes or anything on paper. Didn't trust it. He kept it all up here," Emma said, tapping her temple 3 times. "So then, right, it's all gone. All of it. The motherfucker spent most of my life trying to track down the components of the stone, and then up and died in the middle of the night. Didn't leave a will or a diary or anything behind. Luckily, the guild's bylaws are pretty ironclad regarding inheritance, so I got his seat instead of my arse of an uncle. But it seems like he left me his mess to clean up just the same." "I see. For whatever it's worth, my mom didn't leave me anything either, when she died." A bald-faced lie that I thought was true at the time. My mother gave me her locket as my real inheritance years before her death. That much was obvious now. But it was little solace to the scared girl who suddenly and absolutely was alone in the world. "Huh. Sorry to hear that. Unfortunately, that leaves us back where we were a few days ago, with me sending JP to the cache to pull the box out. You don't trust him? It seems like you two are close." "Very. Our families go back several generations. Ever since we first joined the guild, JP was the best man at my parents' wedding. Still, I don't think I can just..." Emma trailed off and fixed her gaze on the wall behind me, and I pretended to look down at my phone, which I had set to lock after 2 seconds of inactivity, lest Emma grab it and wonder why there were hundreds of pictures of a brown-haired girl who did not look like Jade stored on it. Of course, I had to shut off the face unlock, given that my own face was also locked away. Wait a minute. "What if there was another way?" I asked. "There isn't," said Emma. "At least not one that we will be able to flesh out anytime soon. Let me ask you something. This box, it's just sitting there in some nook in the collection?" "Supposedly." "And so what if whoever put it there wants it back?" "They don't want it back. It's what's inside that matters, and what matters to them is that no one unlock it." "You've been operating under the assumption that we have no way of getting the key. But what if you're wrong?" The still half-full tea kettle next to Emma's cup nearly fell on its side as she slammed the table with both hands. "I'm not. We can't. I didn't pay much attention to what my dad was doing, but this I am certain of. He never found it. Didn't even come close. Are you really that fucking full of yourself that you think you can find in a few days what he spent a decade looking for?" Let's just say I know a thing or two about locked boxes. "This is stupid. Can't believe I agreed to this." "Shh! Stay in character." "Fine, but stop speaking with that horrific accent and just pretend that you're American." "I am American. Even better." Zazzy Scott and her assistant, Jane Hutchinson, emerged from the taxi in front of the Emerson Library at precisely 9:15 on Wednesday morning and walked toward its gleaming double doors. Jane carried a large storage bag on one shoulder, and a flannel tote bag around the other, while Zazie looked weary carrying the tiny purse she clutched in her ring-adorned right hand. "Jane, the door, please," said Zazie/Emma. "Are you fucking serious?" I said under my breath. Yes, I felt bad about using Jane's name again after manipulating her all those months ago to break into Frankie's spin class, but it was the first thing that popped into my head when I created the fake employees of Zazie's soon-to-be makeup empire. "You said stay in character," hissed Emma in response. "Zazie doesn't open doors for herself. It's beneath her." I shook my head in disbelief, the strands of the blonde wig I was wearing rubbing against my temples. Okay, 1 sec. And you're enjoying this too much. I am what you made me. I fumbled with the door handle, the poster card-filled bag nearly sliding down my arm. In contrast, Emma's alchemy-enhanced tote felt like it weighed nearly nothing. Zazie walked through the open door, and I quickly let go of the handle and ran in after her before the door slammed shut on me. We had entered a pristine lobby drenched in sunlight, beyond which was the Atwell courtyard. I motioned Emma toward one of the stone archways that led out into the indoor courtyard, and she followed me behind. The museum that housed the library wasn't open yet, but several of the small tables were occupied by students, either furiously staring into their laptops or outright asleep. We walked to the courtyard center and looked up. The Italian-inspired archways stopped after the second floor, and from where we stood, I could just see the glass walls enclosing the fourth floor, where the beige cabinets holding thousands of pigment samples awaited. "It's up there?" I whispered. "Yep," said Emma. "But don't forget, you still need to work your magic and figure out which one." Yeah, I said. "Seems like I'm doing all the work here. Next time, I get to be the obnoxious socialite, and you can be my overworked blackie. If we ever have to work together again, I think this current arrangement is more to my liking. Let's go." Emma strode off to the elevators at the north end of the courtyard, and I scurried after her, like the good lemming I was pretending to be. We reached the fourth floor without incident or interception, only to be greeted by an empty reception area and a set of locked glass doors down one hallway. "Well, they certainly rolled out the welcome mat, Jane," said Emma, who had upped her British accent to another level. "Where is this Mona Hardin person you said was going to show us around the collection?" I resisted the urge to tell Emma where she could shove the oversized sunglasses and fumbled for my phone. Let me check the email again, Miss Scott. They were supposed to—" "You do that," said Emma, almost shouting. "I'm going to sit down on that uncomfortable-looking piece of furniture over there and hope it doesn't give me a herniated disc." Emma retreated to a backless wooden bench off to the side of the foyer, and I pretended to look for the email with the details of our meeting with the assistant curator. But in reality, this was all going exactly according to plan. I dashed down the hallway opposite the locked glass doors as quickly as I could without running, and then hurried back to the reception area. "Come on," I said, waving Emma up from the bench. "It's empty." We retreated into the spacious conference room I had discovered and closed the door, although the glass walls afforded us little privacy. "Great job, Jane," said Emma. "I can literally see where the bloody vial is hidden, but we can't go any further. I told you that you should have worn the fake baby belly. People are extra nice to pregnant women." "Will you fucking relax?" I said with a snarl. My patience was wearing thin at Emma's condescension, which I suspected was only partially an act. "I'm just getting started. Can you get my equipment out of here?" I handed her the magic tote bag, and she reached her hand into its depths. When she brought it out again, she was holding a laptop bag that stretched the edges of the tote farther than I thought possible. "That's a neat trick," I said as I unpacked the contents of the new bag. "The edges aligned with chrysomelos. It stretches and contracts as needed." I set my assemblage of hacking tools on the table, which consisted of a laptop loaded with white hat and black hat software, and a small black box the size of a deck of playing cards. "What the hell is that little thing going to do?" Emma asked. "This little thing," I said, "is an Odroid C2. It's a tiny but very capable computer. It's our gateway into the museum." I ran an Ethernet cord from the Odroid into a free port embedded in the conference room table, and then opened the laptop. Within a minute, the devices were connected, and I began snooping around. Emma towered behind me in her 6-inch heels, like the overbearing bitch she was pretending to be, usefully blocking anyone outside the room from seeing what we were up to. What exactly are you doing? Seeing how far I can go from this port. If it's connected to the rest of the museum's internal network. Yes! I shut the laptop quickly and stored it away, before retrieving a small plastic bag. That's it? You done? No, the real work will begin tonight, which, thanks to our little friend here, I can do from the safety of the hotel, I said. But before we go, I need to do one more thing. I removed 2 stickers from the bag and stuck them on either side of the Odroid. Property of Carter Museum IT. Do not remove from room, said Emma, reading the stickers. I have to admit, it's pretty clever. That's why you pay me the big bucks, I said as I tucked the Odroid into the mass of messy cables that covered the outlets and ports in the middle of the table. Let's get the hell out of here. I thought we were waiting. Oh no, I said at the top of my voice as we walked out of the conference room. It's all my fault. I misread the email. Our meeting is tomorrow. Not today. Mona is at an off-site. Emma finally snapped back into character. Are you that daft? Honestly, I can't believe I hired you over that girl from Cambridge. She might have been ugly, but at least she could read a 2-line email without fucking everything up. Now, carry this, please. My arm is tired. I'm sorry, Miss Scott, I said, taking the small purse from Emma and wishing I still had the meadowblad. It won't happen again, I swear. For your sake, I hope that's true. Chapter 11. Dragon's Den. Rita smiled and walked away. In the early evening, she set out toward the abandoned building where the two had made their home. They were surprised to see her, for sure, and asked defiantly how she had found them. Right this way, Miss Scott, said Mona Hardin, the assistant curator, directing us around the courtyard perimeter and toward the elevator. Thank you, said Emma in a fawning voice. I'm looking forward to finally visiting the collection. I've read so much about it and already have some ideas on what pigments would be perfect for my powder palette. We have some in mind that we think you'll really enjoy. And of course, we are most appreciative of your commitment to donate a portion of the proceeds to the museum. Emma shot me a glance, which confirmed that she hadn't bothered to read all the way through the elaborate email correspondence I had constructed between the two of us that I had forwarded to Mona. Yes, well, my grandmother was a great patron of the arts, so it seemed only fitting that I continue her work. Oh, that's lovely, said Mona. What sort of work did she do? She, said Emma, stumbling over her words. This is why I had impressed to her over the past few days that every nook and cranny of her cover identity had to be thought through 3 times over. She was on the board of trustees of the Coventry Art Museum, I interjected, when it was clear that Emma was still tongue-tied. Yes, thank you, Jane. I just couldn't put my finger on it. Yes, Gran especially loved the museum's hat collection. Oh, said Mona. I hadn't heard of that. I'll have to take a look when I get a moment. I cursed under my breath. While there was an art museum in Emma's hometown, it consisted entirely of blacksmith implements. But hopefully we would be long gone from here before Mona figured that out. We exited the elevator on the familiar 4th floor, and the curator walked us over to a small display case next to the reception desk. So I thought I would start by showing you some pigments we have showcased this month, said Mona, standing to the left of the case. We peered inside to survey the array of vials and other specimens. That vial in the back corner contains Mummy Brown, which is made up of ground-up mummies. You cannot be serious, said Emma. That's gross. Yes, said Mona with a smile. That's usually the reaction we get. But it does wonders to add transparency to paintings, so it was in high demand in the 17th century. And that piece of foil in the front is coated with a sample of Infiniblack. Traps practically all light within the nanotubes it's made of. You can't even tell that the foil is crumbled from that side. It's incredible. Wow, said Emma. Jane, you're taking notes, right? Tell me you're taking notes. I'm taking notes, I said, scrambling to pull out a small notepad from my bag. Good. We'll want to think about including an Infiniblack-based eyeshadow in the line. And make a note that I have a follow-up meetings with potential distributors on the 3rd, 12th, and 17th. Yes, Miss Scott, I said, not knowing what the hell she was talking about. Maybe she really had immersed herself in the character and was throwing out little details that would make us seem even more believable. If I may interject for a second, said Mona. Unfortunately, Infiniblack is not something you can readily purchase. It's tightly controlled by the manufacturer in England. And you certainly can't use it for human applications. It's highly abrasive to skin. Noted, said Emma. We'll think of something. I have a lot of contacts over there. Anyway, is there anything else in this little case that we should look at, or can we move on to the collection itself? Mona looked a little bit perturbed at Emma denigrating the display, but stifled her reaction. No, that's good for now. We can always come back at the end if there's something else you want to see. Excellent, said Emma, and motioned for the curator to lead us onward. When we got back to the hotel later, I would need to have a talk with her about being unnecessarily condescending. We walked down the hall, and Mona waved her ID over a badge reader to the left of a set of glass doors. Its red light turned green, and I heard something in the door click. Shall we? She asked, and we both nodded in agreement as the curator pushed the doors open. Unbelievably, the first leg of our mission was complete. Now, down here on the 4th floor is the Romberg collection of pigments and varnishes. It was assembled by Dean Romberg over the course of 50 years. He traveled the world collecting rare pigment specimens, and we are so fortunate to be the beneficiary of all that hard work. This way. We turned a corner and made our way down the corridor we had glimpsed from the conference room the other day. The left side was lined with cabinets showing shelves full of jars, vials, and other containers. Underneath them were several rows of drawers. The pigment collection is organized by color, said Mona, as we walked down the hallway. Starting with yellow in the middle, and then extending toward blue in one direction, and then red in the other direction. On the upper shelves, you have the pigments themselves, and underneath, in these drawers, are the chemical duplicates of the pigments. And then finally, on the lower shelves, you have the raw materials. I spotted it just as we reached the middle. It was just lying there, peeking out from its paper wrapping, a simple placard in front of it identifying it to the world as dragon's blood. Next to it was a lump of dragon's blood gum, the hardened version of the pigment. Above, somewhere amongst the racks of vials and rows of jars, was the prize we were seeking. Are we close to Tyrian purple? I said to Mona after nodding to Emma. Miss Scott is a particular fan of the color, and I think it is safe to use in cosmetics? Why, yes, she said, just a little way down. Let me show you. You two go on ahead, said Emma. These reds here are simply delightful. I want to take a closer look. Okay, said Mona. But please don't open any of the cabinets. Wouldn't dream of it, said Emma with a grin. I walked with the curator down to the purple section, looking back quickly to see Emma on her tippy toes staring at one of the upper shelves. So as you can see, said Mona when we reached our destination, Tyrian purple is... Hold on a sec, I said, pulling out my notebook and writing Tyrian purple in big, obnoxious letters at the top. Okay, go. As I was saying, Tyrian purple is made from a secretion of predatory sea snails. Thousands of snails would be required to... Hold that thought, I said. I think I'm going to be sick. Look, I know some of the pigments are made up of unpleasant... It's not that, I interjected. Can you get me to the bathroom? I'm in my first trimester and... Oh, said Mona. Oh. I'm so sorry. Yes, it's right down this hall. But let me tell Miss Scott to come help you since she doesn't know, I said, pretending to wipe sweat from my brow. And if you say anything to her, please, she won't. Okay, let's hurry then. We darted to the end of the hallway, where a set of bathrooms awaited, and Mona led me inside. I retreated to the stall furthest from the door, knelt down in front of the toilet, and pretended to puke my guts out. How are you doing? Called Mona. I think I'm... Nope, I said, Going in for a second round of fakery? My phone buzzed, and I quickly pulled it free from my pocket to see a text from Emma. Big whoop, it said, which was our code word for aborting the mission. I wanted to rush back to the Dragon's Blood cabinet to see what could have happened, but took a few moments to gather myself before slowly opening the stall. Phew, I said to Mona, who looked half sick herself. That was a bad one. Thank you for your discretion. We found Emma crouched down several colors from where we had left her, staring at a rack of orange vials. Jane, said Emma, her cheeks red. There you are. I was wondering where you'd run off to. I'm afraid I've got nothing. This isn't doing it for me. Maybe we should consider a partnership with the aquarium. I'm thinking a clownfish-themed lipstick and maybe... But, said Mona. I'm sorry, I said. You've been very kind, but we need to get going. I grabbed Emma's arm and pulled her away from the exasperated curator and toward the elevator. A man in a white lab coat emerged from within and attempted to thread his way between us, which was a terrible mistake, because Zazie Scott was not the type of person to move out of the way for anyone. And I didn't help the situation by accidentally elbowing him, sending him careening into Zazie, who pushed the startled lab worker aside with a shove. Keep your hands to yourself, perv, said Emma, with a look of disgust, and the man, too embarrassed to say anything in front of Mona, ran off without a word. We rode down to the lobby in silence, where several dozen people were scurrying about with truckloads of floral arrangements for some reason, before hailing a cab to take us to the 5-star hotel we were pretending to stay at. What happened? I finally asked, when we had both collapsed into the large leather chairs in the hotel lobby. It was empty, said Emma flatly. The box? You actually opened it? Yes, said Emma. You make it sound like you didn't think your little magic code word was going to work. Hey, I never said that it was a sure thing. Well, I didn't need it in the end. All those hours practicing and the box was already unlocked. And completely empty, by the way. I would have taken it with me, but it's stuck to the shelf with at least 1, maybe 2 origin links. I couldn't even lift it an inch. So now what? Emma held up a white ID badge sporting a picture of the man from the elevator. Wow, that was some quick work. Compared to what I used to nick for the vultures, this was an easy get. Do you think it will be enough? I looked at the grinning face of the man on the badge. Only one way to find out. Chapter 12. Spycraft. I have my own methods of tracking, she said, but I am most interested to hear about yours. And so they told her about the peculiar flower they had found exploring up in the northern hills of the island that made the rocks nearby glow when you brought them close. The phone rang several times before he answered. Hello? Said a man's voice. Hi, is this Phil Farnsworth? Yes it is. What time is it? 3:40 a.m. I just need a minute. What? Why are you calling me this early? Sir, IT never sleeps, especially when we have museum employees who are so careless with their ID badges that they lose them in Harvard Square. I don't know how that happened. I'm really sorry. But someone returned it then? Yes, someone did, thankfully. But now we have to double check that whoever had your badge didn't improperly access any of the museum's facilities. And that's going to take time. So until it's done, you'll have to work remotely. What? But my research is in the... Yes, in the laboratory, we know. Surely, though, there are some administrative tasks you can occupy yourself with until next Wednesday? I think so. But how am I going to do that from home? I won't be able to log into the internal network here. That's why I'm calling. We're getting you provisional access on your personal computer. Should be done by Monday afternoon. But first things first. In a few moments, you're going to receive a text message with a 4-digit PIN. I'll need you to read that PIN to me so I can authenticate your account. I paused and swallowed hard, waiting for the man on the other end of the line to attach himself to the hook I had thrown to him. Okay, I'm ready. I hit submit on the museum login screen I had open on my own laptop and crossed my fingers. While we wait for that pin to come through, I need you to know that as museum IT personnel, neither I or anyone else on our staff will ever ask you for your password, either over the phone or via email. But what we're generating now, it's just a temporary pin that will only work for the next 60 seconds. That's why I needed to call you. Right. That nasty bit of psychology had been so effective at my old job that the entire engineering team, supposedly some of the best and brightest minds in the city, had been called into the conference room the next morning to explain why nearly everyone had given away the two-factor authentication pin to the random stranger on the phone the day before. And the truth was, I didn't even need his password, as I brute forced my way into his email earlier this evening and reset it. But he didn't need to know that. Okay, I got it, said the lab coat. It's 2514. I input the PIN, and with a click, I was into this dope's account, and with it, all the information about every specimen stored in the collection. Thank you. We'll take it from here. If I were you, I'd probably not mention this, or losing your badge to anyone, yeah? Wouldn't want the hammer to come down on you for a silly mistake. Okay, Phil replied. I'll just call in sick, I guess. You do that, I said. Have a good night. I found it, I said, hours later, after yet another restless night. We had moved our normal morning meeting to the 5-star hotel out at the waterfront, where we had been deposited the previous afternoon. I didn't think we were being followed, but we had spent too many mornings in the same spot, eating the same breakfast, so a change seemed in order. You did? Asked Emma, who looked glad to be back in her normal garb, and I didn't have the heart to tell her that the respite would only be temporary. Well, I'm not 100% positive, but if I'm wrong, then the vial is not in the museum at all, so we're screwed anyway. Fantastic, I guess. So, where is it? It's in the lab, either on the 4th or 5th floor. Was moved there a few days ago, somehow. The collection's database and Farnsworth's emails were cryptic on who or how that was accomplished. All I found was a note in the inventory that said, Exodus. Well, whatever. We can figure that out later. The important thing is that you... Emma suddenly collapsed onto the table in a heap, the sobs coming soon thereafter. I was so taken aback by what was happening that all I could do was hand her a napkin. What's wrong? The girl slowly composed herself and wiped away her smudged mascara before gulping down the rest of her tea. Everything! This was supposed to be my mission. It was my dad's life's work, for fuck's sake, and all I've done so far is let you parade me around town in costume, almost give up my family's oldest secrets, and then open a box that was already unlocked. I thought you didn't care. You told Dahlia that it's called holding your cards close to your vest, Jade. Of course I bloody care. Oh, I see. In my urgency to earn a place in the guild, I had neglected to realize how much this task meant to Emma, and in doing so, how I was on my way to alienating my only ally and almost friend. Look, I said, I'm sorry I entirely pushed you to the side. It's just I was already in over my head, and then you told me what would happen if we failed, and I... You don't need to apologize, she said. I overreacted. You've actually been great. Sure, I thought you were a jerk at first, but I was wrong. We'd be lucky to have you in the guild. Thank you, I said. That means a lot. But we still have to finish the raid. Yes, we do, said Emma, and I think I know how we're going to do it. The woman with pink hair, a long black dress, a gorgeous diamond necklace, and pink heels exited the Mercedes sedan, holding a flannel tote bag. Ahead of her, wedding guests were chatting around cocktail tables, scattered outside the museum entrance, the warm May weather providing the perfect backdrop to what was sure to be a magical evening for the happy couple getting ready inside. But the pink-haired party crasher had other thoughts. She threaded her way through the crowd, drawing whispers and stares from the attendees. Was she one of the bride's college friends? Or a business associate of some kind? With all the attention the woman was attracting, the guests could be forgiven for not noticing the second woman wearing a hooded black cloak that was carefully trailing one step behind. That second woman was me, clad in my invisibility cloak, and the first woman was Emma, who had decided to pick out her own outfit and disguise for this evening's final infiltration. We reached the front door of the museum, and Emma opened it, letting it slowly close behind her so that I had enough berth to glide through. Inside, guests were making their way toward the inner courtyard, which had been transformed into a magnificent display of floral opulence. But Emma ignored all of it, walking directly to the bathroom across from the elevator, and I followed. It was thankfully empty, although the flower infestation had spread into here as well, with decadent arrangements displayed between the sinks. After the door closed behind us, I tapped Emma on the shoulder 3 times to let her know I was still there, and she nodded slightly. I'll make 2 loops around the courtyard before heading up to the 4th floor, and then return down here. Okay, I said with a whisper. Good luck. I'll be in the back stall. You know the code word? We don't need a code word, she said, frowning. I'll just ask if you're in there. Fine, I said. Go. She left, and I entered the stall and locked it behind me before removing the hood of the cloak and undoing the gold clasp. If anyone else had been in the bathroom, they would have seen the bottom of my cloak appear out of nowhere, and I quickly pulled it up and tucked it into my waistband. I waited in silence, trying to calm my pounding heart. A few minutes in, a chattering group of women entered, and one of them tried my stall. Sorry, I said. Taken. The interloper stalked off, but the flow of women in and out continued for another 20 minutes. What was taking Emma so long? My thoughts slowly drifted to the last time I had found myself in a strange bathroom, the night of the Met Gala. Inside that bathroom had been 2 letters that had ended my friendship with Lisa and Stacy. And Dahlia had been there too, as if she had known all along what Beatrice and I were going to do. There was still so much I didn't understand about what had happened with Frankie, Doug, and Gilbert. Hopefully, once this was all over, and I had ascended to the 3rd Brukellen seat, I would get some answers. The chatter finally subsided, which probably meant that the ceremony had started, and at last I heard the door open again, followed by the familiar clacking of heels. Jade, Emma called out. Yes, still here. Good. I'm all set. Cloak on. Let's go. I pulled the hood back over my head, reaffixed the top of the cloak into the gold clasp, and stepped out of the stall. No one was there. Emma? Yes, here. Okay. You might want to change out of those heels then. They're pretty loud. Oh, good call. The flannel tote bag suddenly appeared floating in midair, out of which a pair of sneakers materialized, which then disappeared as well, leaving only the garish pink footwear abandoned on the floor. You going to take those? I said. No, Emma said. They're horrid. The heels skidded across the bathroom tile until they finally stopped underneath the sinks. Let's go. It was easier said than done. Now that we were both invisible, the only way for us to stay together was for Emma to quietly snap her fingers. It worked well enough that we exited the bathroom, traversed the courtyard where the ceremony was in full swing, and down a long hallway, until we came to the end, where another bathroom awaited. The door opened inward of its own accord before closing a few seconds later. Empty, said Emma. Above us hung a security camera, and I darted under it, lest the cloak somehow betray me. I felt Emma's cloak rustle beside me, and then the bag appeared again, followed by a piece of black material and a long selfie stick that had been hidden inside. The case give you any trouble? I said, as the purloined Infiniblack attached itself to one end of the selfie stick. No, said Emma. No alarms or anything. The alkahest ate through the glass like a charm, pulled out the Infiniblack, and then got the hell out of there. Emma pushed the black film against the camera and removed the selfie stick, the material completely obscuring its view. And now we wait, she said, staring up at the camera. That thing makes me so mad. What, the camera? No, the Infiniblack. There's an alchemic paint called aconitium that does something similar. Made only in a small village in Romania. But now the normies have their own version. It's only a matter of time before they figure out technological substitutes for the rest. Can you imagine what would happen then? I had never really thought about it, to be honest, I said, wondering why Emma had launched into a philosophical tirade in the middle of the raid. Well, you should, Jade, you should. Because change is coming, whether Dahlia wants it or not. I'll keep that in mind, I guess. But getting back to the task at hand. Remind me again why we're even bothering with this exercise? We're invisible, for goodness sake. Because, whispered Emma, we'll need to derobe once we get to the lab. This way, we'll know the god won't be troubling us. Okay, I said. How are you going to do it? The spray or the lipstick? I saw him at the desk. Not a bad-looking bloke. On a normal night, I'd try to kiss him. But we need to be absolutely certain, so the spray will have to do. Sounds like a plan. We waited for the guard to appear, all the while the clamor of the ceremony floating our way. It sounded like a fun wedding from what we could make out, and I wondered how much fun I would have had at Lisa's wedding had the whole memory erasure thing not happened. But I stuffed that pathos down into the recesses of my mind as the security guard finally appeared at the end of the hallway. His walk was slow and deliberate, and, unfortunately for him, he stared at the obscured camera for way too long. Because by the time he turned around to see what that weird spritzing noise was, it was already too late. Emma tried to brace his fall, but he was heavier than he looked, and her hands were full. So instead of a graceful landing, his head hit the floor with a thud. Shit, said Emma. Do you think he's okay? My pulse quickened as I examined the unconscious guard. He was still breathing, and there was no blood anywhere, thankfully, but anything more than that I didn't know. I hope so, I said. Let's get him out of sight. We clumsily dragged the man, whose name tag said Dennis, into the small bathroom and let the door swing shut slowly. Now what? I asked to the empty hallway. Now, said Emma's disembodied voice, the fun begins. Chapter 13. Alchemic Surety. Rita observed the two resourceful children and came to the decision quite easily. No longer will you want for food or shelter, and you shall be educated in the old ways and the modern. Should you prove your mettle, when I pass from this world, you will inherit my name and all that comes with it. Do you accept this? The brother and sister stared at each other, bewildered, before nodding. Good, said Rita. Good. My jaw dropped immediately when I saw the disaster that greeted us as we exited the elevator on the 4th floor. What the hell happened here? I said to Emma's invisible figure. You said the alchemist ate through the glass no problem. You didn't mention anything about it destroying half of the case. The display was somehow still precariously balanced on 3 legs, because where the 4th leg had been, now only air remained. And the same went for the contents of the case that had been in the front corner. I shuddered to think how much destruction one tiny drop had caused. Said Emma. Guess I put more alkahest on there than I originally thought. Oh well. Oh well, I said, trying not to raise my voice. They're going to find this tomorrow, and then what? Emma shot back. They'll call the police. Write us an angry letter. We'll be long gone by then, if they ever even figure out who the hell we are. You need to calm down right fucking now, or else you can just wait here. Fine, I said. Phil Farnsworth's badge appeared in midair, and I followed it to the double doors we had passed through yesterday. It waved itself over the badge reader to the left, the red security light turning green, and with a click, the doors unlocked. Let's go, said Emma, as the door pushed itself inward. I trailed her through the gap, breathing a sigh of relief once we were clear on the other side and no alarms had gone off. That worked surprisingly well, I said. Easy part's over, though, said Emma. Whoever unlocked the box didn't just leave the vial out on some table for any rando to take. Need to expect some sort of countermeasure is in place. That's where these rings come in. Emma held up her left hand, which sported even more rings than I remembered. Right, I said, the small pit in my stomach growing ever so slightly. I had let Emma fully take the lead on the rest of the mission as a show of confidence in her ability, but the fact that she really didn't have any idea what we were up against was incredibly disconcerting. Then again, who knew what else she had in that magic bag of hers? Lights from the wedding down below cast an eerie glow on the hallway of colors, but we turned away from the atrium and walked casually into the adjacent laboratory. Emma appeared out of thin air, her cloaked figure looking ominous among the tables scattered throughout the room. I followed suit, undoing the gold clasp on my own cloak, and she nodded at my now visible features, before quickly shedding her garment and partially stuffing it into the top of the flannel bag. We crisscrossed the room, ignoring the numerous paintings wrapped in plastic, but quickly concluded that this floor of the lab seemed to be destitute of pigment samples. Climbing the wide staircase back at the front, we reached the summit of the raid and our last chance to find the prize. This floor of the lab was situated differently. Instead of tables of artwork, there were benches with microscopes and computers. Vials and cans of samples and standards dotted the workspace, and the gentle hum of machines reminded me of my old office. Again, our survey turned up empty, and we regrouped at the top of the stairs. It doesn't seem to be here, Emma said. You're absolutely positive that the dragon's blood was transferred to the lab? No, and I never said I was, I replied. The inventory page just said that. Shh, said Emma, holding up her left hand. I think I'm getting something. She held her palm flat and moved it around in a circle, and I could just make out the vibrations emanating from the druthiel in her rings. Moving a couple of feet forward, Emma repeated the exercise, shook her head from side to side, and then walked to a different set of benches. Finally, she stopped in front of the lone piece of artwork in the lab, a 7-foot-tall painting of a woman in a red dress that was suspended between a wooden frame resting on an easel. The figure was striking, with red eyes and hair that matched her dress, and she stood behind a looming horde of knights on horseback. At the bottom of the frame, a small label read, Girl on Fire, Artist Unknown, 1495. What is it? I said. The dragon's blood, she said. It's in the painting. I looked at the portrait. The color of the red fabric seemed to pop from the canvas, almost as if the woman was about to step out of the painting into the real world. The note in the inventory, I said. Exodus. But why did they do that? Emma ran her finger across the dress and it came up clean. They're moving it. Maybe they were expecting us, or someone else. Knew we'd be in on the scent of the vial in a locked wooden box. So they repurposed the dragon's blood. Coated over the regular paint with it. Makes sense. It was hidden in the pigment collection, after all. So now what? I don't know, said Emma. I'm thinking. She circled the easel with her left hand out in front of her to detect more hidden alchemy. The silver rings continued vibrating as she surveyed, but to my untrained eyes, it didn't look like there was anything else there. Said Emma, finally, after a few more minutes. What? I asked. I can feel a second source of alchemy coming from somewhere around the painting, but what do you mean, second source? The rings, they vibrate with a slightly different frequency depending on what they're detecting, so I can feel the dragon's blood, and then... Emma reached her fingertips forward to touch something at the bottom of the easel, and that's when the whole damn thing caught on fire. The flames were blue, which I wasn't expecting. They also had formed a neat ring around the canvas, but had gone no further. And finally, they seemed to be ice cold. It was at once amazing and terrifying. What the hell is happening? I asked. It's Varutium, Emma replied. Only burns where a specific primer has been spread. I should have figured. Varutium? Some call it hellfire. A bit dramatic, if you ask me. Used to create impromptu prisons back in the day for the virgins who were to be sacrificed in a volcano, or stabbed on an altar or some other nonsense. Then they started using it to burn the girls straight up. Then finally it fell out of use and memory sometime around the 18th century. Obviously these fuckers found a lost stash of it somewhere. How do you know so much about it, then? Why did every new alchemy discovery of mine have to have some terrifying past that needed reckoning with? Because, said Emma, it's what killed my gran. What? Are you serious? Yep, she replied nonchalantly. Well, I guess I have to applaud your calm demeanor. If I ever came face to face with the scumbag that killed my mom, I don't know what I'd do. Oh, I'm not calm, I'm fuming, said Emma. But I learned long ago how to channel my anger until I could release it somewhere useful. If you say so, I said, my growing unease making my arms twitch. I'm guessing it's not the kind of fire that water can handle? You are correct. Demonium, on the other hand, would douse it in an instant, but I don't have any of it in my bag, unfortunately. I couldn't help but stare at the otherworldly blue flames as they danced around the woman in the red dress. Then the colors suddenly mixed together with a raging blaze of orange and sulfur, and I was back in the burning lighthouse, the ceiling about to collapse, and two women splayed out on the floor in front of me. I felt my arm bring itself up to my face, and then my palm violently connect with my cheek, nearly sending me tumbling to the ground. I quickly regained my balance, Emma none the wiser, and that's when a small whisper escaped my lips. Get a hold of yourself, Jade, or I will. Jade's grip of control released itself, and my body, well, her body, went slack. I closed my eyes, muttered a few soft words of self-encouragement, and then took my place next to Emma in front of the burning painting. My partner in crime had retrieved a small footstool from her flannel bag, and was now nearly eye level with the woman in the painting. What are you doing? I asked. Being very careful not to set myself on fire, Emma replied. What does it look like I'm doing? Sorry, I said. Do you need any help with that? Yes, said Emma. Stop talking. I nodded and watched as Emma slowly brought her hands to the top of the canvas. Several pieces of wire were fastened to both the burning frame and the painting's support board. She extended her arm behind one corner of the canvas, ignoring the flames just inches away, and after about 30 seconds, she withdrew it and the painting dropped slightly. She moved on to the second piece of wire and soon detached that one as well. This continued on as she worked her way along the top of the painting until she reached the last bit when suddenly her whole body jerked forward. Are you all right? I asked. Not really, said Emma, who tried to detach herself from the painting only to find her right hand stuck. Why can't you get your hand off there? They must have, Emma grunted as she made a second attempt at freeing herself. Sprayed the canvas with neutral origin. It's bonded to my rings. Who did? Enough with the fucking questions, Jade. I need to think. I looked over at Emma's bag at the foot of the easel. Inside was probably a magic hacksaw that could cut an origin link, and who knew what else. Your bag, I said. Is there anything in there that could help? Emma stared at the bag, and then at me, and her face recoiled. Yes, but... She tried to pull her hand free yet again, only for the origin link to snap it back into place. I can't get anything out of it with my rings stuck. Unless... What? The alkahest. It's in a tiny pocket on the outside of my bag. Get it, quickly! I complied and found the small vial that had once held the silvery liquid. It didn't look like there was more than a drop of the alkahest left, but I knew what the stuff was capable of, so maybe that was enough. Okay, now what? I saw a larger stepladder right by the stairs on this floor. Bring it over here. I did as I was told again, and positioned the metal steps next to Emma's stool, climbing up to the top so that I was standing a few inches above her, the flames a little too close for my liking. What am I supposed to do with this? I asked. You're going to carefully pour the last few drops onto the portion of the painting between my fingers. Okay, I said. I unstoppered the vial and tilted it gently against the painting. Somehow, the alkahest must have dribbled out onto the canvas, because a tiny hole appeared in between Emma's pinky and ring fingers. We both waited with bated breath, for what seemed like an hour for the alkahest to dissolve the origin bond. "It's not enough," said Emma, surveying the partially dissolved painting. "You're going to break the vial on my rings." "What?" "I need to be sure the rest of the alkahest gets out. If I lose part of a finger, so be it." "You're serious?" I said. "Yes. Do you think you can handle this without flipping out?" I nodded. "Good. Aim for the ring on my pinky," said Emma. "And with feeling, Jade. You only get one chance to get this right." "Thanks. That was just the confidence boost I needed." My hands immediately started trembling as I made a few practice motions, ending with me tapping the vial gently against Emma's pinky ring. Finally, I took one more deep breath and then swung the vial toward Emma's hand. But alchemy has a funny way of messing with your expectations of how the world should work. Because at the last second, I felt my arm suddenly shift to the right, as if someone had jerked it with a puppet's string, and instead of smashing Emma's hand, the vial flew out of my grasp and into the burning frame. "You always make sure." Emma stared at me as the words escaped my mouth, but they weren't mine. "No!" she shouted, trying with one last effort to pull her hand free. The room suddenly exploded with a flash of blue light, and I was thrown backward. I landed with a hard thud against the leg of a nearby table and quickly tried to get into my feet. But my head was spinning and my vision was cloudy, and so I collapsed onto the floor, unable to do anything. Smoke was everywhere when I regained consciousness a few moments later, and I felt myself being pulled back into the memory of that night in the lighthouse again. I gasped for air and grasped for control, not wanting to surrender myself to the whim of the stone. Slowly, I crawled over to where the easel had been, my eyes struggling to stay open. But only one truth remained. Emma was gone. BFD firefighters say they've never encountered a blaze like the one that tore through the 4th and 5th floors of the Carter Museum last night, taking nearly 13 hours to get the fire under control. Miraculously, of the 2 casualties of the night, one was merely the abrupt end of the wedding in the courtyard on the 1st floor, which was scheduled to last until 2 a.m. The guests were safely evacuated thanks to the quick thinking of the security guard on duty, who was found unconscious under the activated fire alarm. Unfortunately, the other casualty was the museum's near-priceless collection of pigments, paints, and varnishes, which were completely destroyed. 100 years of curation, gone in the span of hours. Reporting live from Cambridge, Natasha Nettle, Channel 13 News. I flipped off the 3rd newscast of the morning and resisted the urge to throw the remote control at the hotel room TV. But I'd caused enough damage for one day. My body ached in every possible place, the 3 doses of healing serum I had ingested over the course of the night doing little to relieve the pain. Jade's eyebrows, and maybe mine too underneath, were nearly singed off, and the hair on my arms would have been too if I hadn't still been wearing the cloak. That garment somehow had come out of the explosion unscathed, and it was buried somewhere within the folds of the sheets, as I hadn't bothered to remove it before I collapsed into unconsciousness, if you could call it that. My eyes might have been closed, but my mind had been awake, reliving the events of the disastrous evening in all sorts of different and horrible ways. But in every replay, the result had been the same. Jade had seized control of my arm and directed the alkahest toward the hellfire. The stone, her stone, I realized, was tucked at the bottom of my suitcase. Her visage still clung to my body, like an annoying relative who refused to leave after a family gathering. As much as I wanted to run to the Bunker Hill Bridge and toss the stupid thing into the Charles River, knowing my luck, that would only deepen Jade's grip on me. I grabbed my phone from the nightstand and dialed Emma's number yet again. It went straight to voicemail. It was silly, I knew, to hold out hope that she had somehow escaped the blaze, that she was lying low while she recovered. But I had seen the burnt threads of her dress, the scorched strands of her pink wig, the melted metal puddle of what had been her necklace, and the singed scraps of the fabric that had been her bag. Maybe she was in a hospital bed somewhere, her body burned beyond recognition. But the most likely outcome was that the alkahest-enhanced blast had completely obliterated her. I flipped over onto my stomach and let out a string of muffled cries into a pillow. But whatever catharsis I had hoped to achieve was diluted by hearing that alien voice come out of my mouth. And what followed was every anxious thought I had been suppressing the previous few weeks. My hopes of joining the guild, discovering why my mother had the gold token, ridding myself of this prison enveloping me, all now out of reach. I screamed again and felt something inside me crack, like the last boundary between myself and Jade had finally been weathered away by whatever alchemy was powering the glamour. And then my body lifted itself off of the bed, walked over to my luggage, and retrieved the stone from its hiding place. I stepped into the bathroom and watched in the mirror as my hands gently placed the chain over my head, and then tucked the gem into the confines of my sweater. "That's better," said Jade's voice with a smile. And that was the last thing I remembered for the next 2 weeks.